A poor single dad returned a lost puppy to a little girl. But the moment she opened the door, his whole world changed. She looked up at him with wide eyes and whispered, "Mommy says you're my daddy." At first, he thought it had to be some mistake until she showed him a locket with a picture of him and his late wife inside. But that was just the beginning. Because this little girl wasn't just a stranger, she was the secret heiress to a massive fortune his wife never told him about. Now, a powerful relative will do anything to take her away, and he's running out of time to prove he's the only one who truly loves her. If you were him, would you walk away to protect yourself? Or risk everything to fight for the daughter you never knew? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The autumn rain drummed steadily against the windshield of Caleb Harper's old Ford pickup as he made his way home from Mitchell's garage. His worn hands gripped the steering wheel, shoulders tired from a long day of crawling under cars and wrestling with stubborn engines. The wipers squeaked back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the constant drizzle that had settled over their small town since morning. Caleb adjusted the heater that never quite worked right, despite his best efforts to fix it. The truck rattled along the familiar country road, its aged suspension protesting every bump and pothole. The gray afternoon light was starting to fade, making the wet pavement gleam like polished steel. Through the streaky windshield, something caught his eye. A small, dark shape huddled against the guardrail. Caleb squinted, slowing the truck. As he drew closer, his heart sank. There, trembling in the cold rain, was a puppy. "Oh no," he muttered, immediately pulling onto the shoulder. The truck's tires crunched on wet gravel as he stopped and put it in park. Without hesitation, Caleb grabbed his trusty flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the rain. The puppy looked up at his approach, ears drooping, tail tucked. It was a scruffy little thing, maybe a terrier mix, completely covered in mud. When Caleb crouched down, speaking softly, the puppy took a tentative step toward him. "Hey there, little fella. What are you doing out here all alone?" His voice was gentle, the same tone he'd used years ago when Luke was small and scared of thunderstorms. The puppy inched closer, shivering violently. Caleb unzipped his work jacket, the blue one with Harper stitched above the pocket, and held it open. "Come on now, let's get you out of this rain." The puppy finally closed the distance, pressing against Caleb's leg. Its fur was soaked through, cold against his hands as he carefully scooped the little creature up. The puppy didn't struggle, instead burrowing into the warmth of his chest as he wrapped the jacket around it. "There we go," Caleb murmured, hurrying back to the truck. Once inside, he held the bundled puppy close, trying to share some body heat. Under the dome light, he could see it was young, probably not much more than a few months old. Despite being muddy and wet, the puppy wore a collar, a nice one, made of soft leather. Caleb shifted the bundle carefully, using one hand to check the small brass tag that hung from the collar. "Muffin," he read aloud, smiling at the name. The puppy's ears perked up slightly. "So you're Muffin, huh?" The address below the name made his eyebrows raise. 21 Greenwillow Lane. That was over in the Meadowbrook district, where all the big houses were. Caleb knew the area, though he rarely had reason to visit. Most folks there drove new cars still under warranty, taking them to the dealership rather than his modest garage. He glanced at his watch, thinking of Luke waiting at home. His son was 16 now, old enough to handle dinner on his own, but Caleb still didn't like to be late without calling. The puppy shivered against him, letting out a tiny whimper. "All right, Muffin," he said, putting the truck in gear. "Let's get you home." The rain was falling harder as Caleb turned onto Meadowbrook Road. The neat rows of modest homes gave way to sprawling properties hidden behind old trees and elaborate gates. His truck looked increasingly out of place as he drove past manicured lawns and luxury cars. Greenwillow Lane branched off to the right, a narrow road that wound up a gentle hill. The houses here were even grander, set far back from the street. Caleb drove slowly, squinting at mailbox numbers through the rain-streaked windshield. Finally, he spotted number 21. The mailbox was wrought iron, elegant scrollwork, spelling out the house number. Beyond it, a long driveway disappeared into a tunnel of ancient oak trees, their branches forming a dark canopy overhead. The driveway curved past carefully tended gardens, now drooping under the weight of the rain. At last, the house came into view, and Caleb felt his breath catch. It wasn't just a house, it was a mansion. 3 stories of weathered stone and intricate woodwork. Thick ivy covered much of the walls, and tall windows reflected the gray sky like dark mirrors. Caleb parked near the front steps, suddenly very aware of his muddy work boots and oil-stained jeans. Muffin stirred in his lap, seeming to recognize home. The puppy's fur had started to dry, leaving dusty marks all over Caleb's shirt. "Well, let's get you inside," he said, gathering the puppy in his jacket. The rain plastered his graying hair to his forehead as he climbed the wide stone steps to the front door. An ornate brass knocker hung at eye level, but Caleb spotted a modern doorbell button and pressed it instead. Chimes echoed somewhere deep inside the house. Muffin wiggled in his arms, tail beginning to wag. Water dripped steadily from Caleb's hair and clothes onto the welcome mat as he waited. After a moment, he heard light footsteps approaching from inside. The heavy door creaked open, and Caleb prepared to explain himself to whoever answered. A housekeeper, maybe, or the wealthy family who lived here. Instead, he found himself looking down at a little girl. She was small, maybe 7 or 8, with dark hair pulled back in neat braids. She wore a pale blue dress and white socks, and her eyes went wide at the sight of the muddy puppy in Caleb's arms. "Muffin!" she exclaimed, reaching out as the puppy squirmed excitedly. But then she drew back, suddenly shy as she really looked at Caleb, her small hands twisted in the fabric of her dress. "Hi there," Caleb said warmly, crouching down to her level despite his aching back. "I found this little one out on Preston Road. The tag said this was home." The girl nodded, still hesitant. Then she tilted her head, studying his face with an intensity that made Caleb slightly uncomfortable. Her next words came out in a trembling whisper that stopped his heart. "Mommy says you're my daddy." Caleb's weathered truck looked out of place among the manicured gardens and stone fountains of 21 Greenwillow Lane. The mansion loomed before him, its ivy-covered walls disappearing into the misty rain. Gothic windows stared down like watchful eyes, and elaborate stonework decorated every corner and archway. The old truck's door groaned as Caleb stepped out into the steady drizzle, Muffin still bundled in his work jacket. His boots left muddy prints on the pristine stone steps as he climbed toward the heavy oak door. An ornate brass knocker hung at eye level, a lion's head clutching a ring in its jaws. Next to it, someone had installed a modern doorbell, its plastic button looking strangely ordinary against the aged wood. Caleb shifted Muffin in his arms, the puppy's wet fur soaking through his already damp shirt. He pressed the doorbell, hearing musical chimes echo somewhere deep within the house. While he waited, water dripped steadily from his hair and clothes onto the welcome mat, forming a small puddle around his feet. The sound of light footsteps approached from inside. Then came the metallic scrape of a lock turning, and the massive door swung inward with a low creak. Caleb had expected a butler or housekeeper, someone proper and formal to match the grandeur of the house. Instead, he found himself looking down at a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, with dark hair pulled back in neat braids tied with blue ribbons. Her dress was pale blue, pristine and pressed, matched with white ankle socks and shiny black shoes. But it was her eyes that caught Caleb's attention, large hazel eyes that seemed somehow familiar, though he couldn't place why. The girl's face lit up at the sight of the muddy bundle in Caleb's arms. "Muffin!" she cried, reaching out as the puppy began squirming excitedly. Caleb carefully lowered himself to one knee, ignoring the protest in his back from a long day of mechanical work. "Here you go," he said gently, helping to transfer the wiggling puppy into her small arms. "Found this little escape artist out on Preston Road, pretty far from home." Muffin covered the girl's face with enthusiastic kisses, tail wagging furiously. She giggled, hugging the puppy close despite the mud now transferring to her clean dress. But then she grew still, looking up at Caleb with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Those hazel eyes studied his face with an unchildlike focus, as if searching for something. "You're him," she whispered, so quietly Caleb almost missed it over the sound of rain. "You look just like the picture." "I'm sorry?" Caleb straightened up, confused. "What picture?" The girl clutched Muffin tighter, her lower lip trembling slightly. "The one in Mommy's locket, the one she showed me." Her voice quavered as she added, "Mommy says, you're my daddy." The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. He staggered back a step, steadying himself against the doorframe. What?" he stammered, his mind refusing to process what he'd just heard. "No, there must be some mistake. I can't." But the girl was already fumbling with something around her neck, a delicate gold chain that disappeared beneath her collar. She pulled it out to reveal a small, heart-shaped locket, tarnished with age. With fingers that trembled slightly, she clicked it open. Caleb's legs went weak. There, in the tiny frame, was a photograph he remembered being taken over a decade ago. He and Emily on their wedding day, both of them young and laughing, his arm around her waist as she leaned into him. He still had the same photo in an album at home, though he rarely looked at it anymore. The grief was still too raw, even after all these years. This is impossible, he managed, his voice hoarse. Emily never. She would have told me if. He ran a shaking hand through his wet hair, sending droplets flying. Who are you? Who's your mother? The girl? Could she really be? No, it wasn't possible. Hugged Muffin closer, looking suddenly uncertain. My name is Anna, she said softly. And Mommy. Mommy was Emily, but she's in heaven now, like Mrs. Harrison says. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Emily. His Emily. But how? When? They'd only been married 8 years before the accident took her. Unless this was from before. Before they'd met. Before they'd fallen in love. Before. Anna! A woman's voice called from somewhere inside the house. Who's at the door, dear? The girl turned toward the sound. It's him, she called back, excitement overtaking her shyness. The man from Mommy's picture. He found Muffin. She looked back at Caleb, who stood rooted to the spot, rainwater still dripping from his clothes onto the marble floor of the entryway. Wait here, she said earnestly. I'll get Mrs. Harrison. She'll explain everything. Before Caleb could form a response, Anna had turned and disappeared down the hallway, her patent leather shoes clicking on the polished floor. Muffin bounced along beside her, leaving muddy paw prints in their wake. Their footsteps faded, swallowed by the vastness of the house. Caleb remained frozen in the grand entryway, his mind spinning. Around him, the mansion's opulent furnishings seemed to blur and waver. The crystal chandelier overhead, the oriental rugs, the oil paintings in gilded frames. Everything felt surreal, dreamlike. The only sound was the steady drip of rainwater from his clothes, forming a growing puddle at his feet. The click of heels on marble announced Mrs. Whitaker's arrival before Caleb saw her. A woman in her mid-50s hurried down the hallway, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a cardigan over a simple dress, practical clothes that somehow still managed to look elegant. Her face was kind, but worried as she approached, wringing her hands. Mr. Harper, she said, slightly out of breath. I'm Margaret Whitaker, Anna's caretaker. Please, come in out of the rain. She gestured toward a sitting room off the main hall. Let me get you a towel. Caleb followed her in a daze, barely registering the plush armchairs and antique furniture. A fire crackled in an ornate fireplace, and through tall windows, he could see rain streaming down over the manicured gardens. Mrs. Whitaker disappeared briefly, returning with a thick towel that she handed to him. I know this must be quite a shock, she said, perching on the edge of an armchair. Please, sit down, we have much to discuss. Caleb sank into a chair, dabbing at his wet hair with the towel. I don't understand any of this, he said. Emily never mentioned. We were married 8 years. Surely she would have told me if she had a daughter. Mrs. Whitaker's eyes filled with sympathy. It's complicated, she said softly. Emily wanted to tell you many times, but her family. She shook her head. They're old money, very concerned with appearances. When Emily became pregnant at 19, they were furious. They forced her to give Anna up for adoption to avoid a scandal. Caleb's hands clenched around the towel. But Anna's here now, with you. Yes, Mrs. Whitaker smoothed her skirt, a nervous gesture. Emily never truly gave up on Anna. She arranged for me to adopt her privately so she could stay in contact. The family thought Anna had gone to strangers, but I was Emily's mother's closest friend before the falling out. I promised to keep Anna safe, to give her a good home. She stood, walking to a delicate side table where a small jewelry box sat. Emily visited when she could, though she had to be careful. Her family still watched her closely, even after she married you. Opening the box, she removed something that glinted gold in the firelight. She gave this to Anna on her last visit just weeks before the accident. Caleb took the locket with trembling hands. It was identical to the one Anna wore, but slightly newer. Inside was the same wedding photo, but on the opposite side was a picture he'd never seen before. Emily holding a tiny baby, her face young and radiant with love. That's Anna, Mrs. Whitaker said softly. Emily was allowed one day with her before they took her away. Caleb stared at the photo, his vision blurring. Emily had carried this secret all those years, this pain he'd known nothing about. How many times had she wanted to tell him? How many nights had she lain awake, missing the daughter she couldn't claim? The last time Emily visited, Mrs. Whitaker continued, her voice gentle, she said she was finally ready to tell you everything. She couldn't bear the separation anymore. She wanted Anna to know her father, to be a real family. She paused, blinking back tears. The accident happened 3 days later. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending up a shower of sparks. From somewhere upstairs came the sound of Anna's laughter, followed by excited yips from Muffin. The sound pierced Caleb's heart. "She's mine?" he whispered, still staring at the locket. "Truly mine?" "Yes," Mrs. Whitaker said firmly. "Emily listed you as the father on Anna's birth certificate. She never told anyone else who the father was, not even her family. She wanted to protect you from their interference." Caleb closed the locket carefully, running his thumb over its smooth surface. "Does Anna know about me?" "Emily told her stories about you, showed her pictures. She wanted Anna to know how kind you were, how much you would have loved her if you'd known." Mrs. Whitaker leaned forward. "That's why Anna recognized you today. She's been waiting to meet you her whole life." The weight of it all pressed down on Caleb's chest. A daughter. He had a daughter he'd never known about. All these years, while he'd been raising Luke alone, grieving Emily, there had been another child, his child, just across town. "I need to." He stood abruptly, swaying slightly. "I need time to process this, to think." Mrs. Whitaker nodded understanding. "Of course, it's a lot to take in." She wrote something on a slip of paper and handed it to him. "My number. Please call when you're ready to talk more. Anna." She hesitated. "Anna will be hoping to see you again." "I'll come back," Caleb said, surprising himself with how certain he felt about that. "Tomorrow, maybe, or the next day. I just need time," Mrs. Whitaker finished. "I understand completely." She walked him to the door. The rain had eased to a gentle drizzle, and the late afternoon light was turning golden as the clouds began to break. Before he stepped out, Caleb heard quick footsteps on the stairs. "Are you leaving?" Anna stood at the bottom of the staircase, Muffin cradled in her arms. Her eyes, Emily's eyes, watched him anxiously. "Just for now," Caleb said, his voice rough. "But I'll come back soon, I promise." Anna's face brightened. "Really? You promise?" "I promise." The words felt heavy with meaning, like he was pledging something far more significant than a simple visit. The drive home passed in a blur. Caleb barely noticed the scenery changing from manicured estates to familiar working-class neighborhoods. His mind kept circling back to those photographs. Emily young and radiant with her baby. Emily on their wedding day. Both images contained in matching lockets, worn by a little girl with his late wife's eyes. The old truck's engine sputtered as Caleb pulled into the gravel driveway of their small rental house. The white paint was peeling, and the front steps creaked, but it was home. Through the kitchen window, he could see Luke bent over his homework, the warm, yellow light making the scene look like something from a Norman Rockwell painting. Caleb sat in the truck for a long moment, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. The locket felt heavy in his jacket pocket. How do you tell your teenage son that he has a sister he never knew about? That his mother had kept such a huge secret from both of them? Finally, he took a deep breath and climbed out. The screen door squeaked as he entered, and Luke looked up from his textbooks spread across the kitchen table. At 16, Luke was already taller than Caleb, with Emily's dark hair and gentle eyes. "Hey, Dad," Luke said, then frowned. "You're soaked. Everything okay?" Caleb hung his wet jacket on the hook by the door. "Yeah, it's been quite a day." He walked to the coffee maker and started brewing a fresh pot, needing something to do with his hands. "How was school?" "Fine. Got an A on my history test." Luke watched him carefully. "Dad, you're acting weird. Did something happen at work?" The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. Caleb leaned against the counter, studying the worn linoleum floor. "No, not at work. I found a lost puppy on my way home. Took it back to its owner's house. And..." He rubbed his face. "Luke, there's something I need to tell you. Something big." Luke pushed his textbook aside, giving Caleb his full attention. "What is it?" Caleb pulled out one of the mismatched kitchen chairs and sat down heavily. The puppy belonged to a little girl named Anna. "She's 8 years old, and..." He pulled out the locket and placed it on the table. "She's your sister, half-sister technically. Luke stared at the locket, then at Caleb, his eyes wide. What? How is that? I don't understand. Neither did I at first. Caleb opened the locket, showing Luke the photos. Your mom had Anna before we were married, her family. They made her give the baby up. She never told me about it. Luke picked up the locket with careful fingers, studying the picture of Emily with baby Anna. Mom had another kid, and she never said anything? His voice cracked slightly. Why wouldn't she tell us? It's complicated, son. Her family, they're wealthy people with strict ideas about reputation. They forced her to keep it secret. Caleb watched Luke's face, trying to gauge his reaction. She was planning to tell us, right before the accident. At least, that's what her caretaker told me. Caretaker? Mrs. Whitaker. She adopted Anna privately so your mom could stay in touch. She's been raising her in this big house on Green Willow Lane. Luke sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like Emily it made Caleb's heart ache. So I have a sister, a little sister. He looked up suddenly. What's she like? The question caught Caleb off guard. He'd been preparing for anger, confusion, maybe even rejection. But there was only curiosity in Luke's voice, and something that might have been hope. She has your mom's eyes, Caleb said softly. She's quiet, but brave enough to open the door to a stranger. She loves that puppy, something fierce. And he swallowed hard. She knew who I was. Your mom had told her about me. Can we meet her? Luke asked. I mean, properly? I've always wanted a sister. Caleb felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. You're okay with this? With all of it? Luke shrugged, but his eyes were serious. Mom must have had her reasons for keeping it secret. And it's not Anna's fault. She's family, right? Yeah, Caleb said, his voice rough. Yeah, she is. He cleared his throat. I told Mrs. Whitaker I'd come back, maybe tomorrow or the next day. Would you want to come with me? Definitely. Luke got up and went to the cabinet where they kept their baking supplies. We should bring cookies or something. Kids like cookies, right? And we've got all those chocolate chips from when Mrs. Johnson brought over groceries last week. Caleb watched as his son started pulling out flour and sugar, just like Emily used to do when she was working through something difficult. His heart felt like it might burst with love and pride for this boy who could take such earth-shattering news and immediately think about making his newfound sister feel welcome. Cookies sound perfect, he managed, forcing a smile even as his mind raced with worries. What if Anna's family tried to keep them away? What if they weren't good enough for her world of mansions and trust funds? What if he messed this up somehow? But watching Luke measure ingredients with careful concentration, Caleb felt the afternoon sun warmed Caleb's shoulders as he and Luke walked up the winding path to the mansion's front door. Luke clutched a blue tin filled with still warm chocolate chip cookies, his hands fidgeting with the lid. The ivy-covered walls seemed less imposing in the daylight, but Caleb's heart still hammered as he reached for the brass doorbell. You okay, Dad? Luke asked quietly. Caleb managed a small nod. Just nervous, I guess. He straightened his cleanest work shirt, wishing he owned something nicer. Before he could ring the bell, the heavy door swung open. Anna stood there in a yellow sundress, her face lighting up at the sight of them. Muffin bounded out behind her, tail wagging furiously as he recognized Caleb. You came back! Anna's voice was filled with wonder, as if she hadn't quite believed they would. Her eyes traveled curiously to Luke, and she took a small step backward. Hi, Anna, Caleb said gently. This is Luke, my son. Your brother. Luke crouched down to her eye level, still holding the cookie tin. Hey there, we made you something. He opened the lid, revealing neat rows of cookies. Dad says you might like chocolate chip. Anna's eyes widened at the word brother. She glanced between Luke and the cookies, then reached out tentatively to take one. Thank you, she whispered. Mrs. Whitaker appeared in the doorway, smiling warmly. Why don't you all enjoy the garden? It's such a lovely day. She gestured toward a gate leading to the back of the house. Anna, why don't you show them your favorite spot? Anna nodded eagerly, cookie already half eaten. Come on! She grabbed Luke's hand without hesitation, pulling him along. Muffin yipped excitedly, darting between their legs. The garden was a child's paradise, with winding paths, flowering bushes, and a giant oak tree that spread protective branches over a worn wooden swing. Rose bushes lined the neat brick paths, their blooms nodding in the gentle breeze. This is where Muffin and I play fetch, Anna announced, leading them to a patch of soft grass. She reached into a pocket of her dress and pulled out a small red ball. "Want to try?" Luke set the cookie tin on a nearby bench and took the ball. "Sure, ready, Muffin?" The puppy's ears perked up, his whole body wiggling with anticipation. Luke tossed the ball gently, and Muffin took off after it, stumbling over his own paws in excitement. Caleb settled on the bench, content to watch as his children, both of them, he realized with a start, played with the dog. Anna's laughter rang out clear and sweet when Muffin brought the ball back to her instead of Luke. After a while, Anna flopped down in the grass near Caleb's feet, slightly out of breath. Luke had wandered over to examine a butterfly bush, giving them a moment alone. Muffin curled up in Anna's lap, panting happily. "Can I ask you something?" Anna said, looking up at Caleb with those familiar hazel eyes. Emily's eyes. "Of course you can, sweetheart. What was Mommy like? Mrs. Whitaker tells me stories, but she traced patterns in Muffin's fur. I want to know everything." Caleb's throat tightened. He slid down to sit in the grass beside her, taking a moment to find the right words. "Your mom was the kindest person I ever knew. She could make friends with anyone, and she always noticed when people needed help. She loved to bake, just like Luke does now, and she sang while she worked in the kitchen." "Did she sing lullabies?" Anna's voice was barely a whisper. "Every night. Her favorite was 'You Are My Sunshine.'" Caleb smiled at the memory. "She had a beautiful voice." "That's my favorite too." Anna sat up straighter. "Mrs. Whitaker sings it to me sometimes, but she says she learned it from Mommy." Caleb noticed Luke had drifted back closer, listening quietly. "Your mom also loved books," he continued. "She read everything she could get her hands on, and she was always telling stories." "I love reading," Anna said. "I have a whole bookshelf in my room." She hesitated, then asked, Did she ever talk about me?" The innocent question hit Caleb like a physical blow. He saw Luke tense, waiting for his answer. "Anna," Caleb said carefully, "your mom loved you very, very much. She wanted to tell us about you. She was planning to, but—" He swallowed hard. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, even when they're trying to protect the people they love. But none of that was your fault, and none of it changed how much she loved you. Anna nodded solemnly, processing this. Then she reached over and took Caleb's rough, work-worn hand in her small, soft one. "Will you tell me more stories about her, please?" "Anytime you want," Caleb promised, his heart swelling with an unexpected surge of fatherly love. They spent another hour in the garden, sharing cookies and stories. Luke taught Anna how to make muffins sit and shake hands, while Caleb described how Emily had once rescued a whole family of baby birds that fell from their nest, feeding them with an eyedropper until they could fly. When Mrs. Whitaker finally called that it was time for Anna's dinner, the sun was starting to sink behind the oak tree. As they walked back to the front door, Anna suddenly wrapped her arms around Caleb's leg, pressing her face against his knee. "Please come back," she whispered, her voice muffled against his jeans. Caleb rested his hand gently on her head. "We will," he nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of promise and possibility. "We'll come back soon." The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Caleb's repair shop as he worked under the hood of Mrs. Jensen's old Buick. His phone buzzed in his pocket, surprising him enough that he bumped his head on the hood. Wiping his greasy hands on a rag, he fished out the phone. "Mr. Harper?" Mrs. Whitaker's usually composed voice held an edge of urgency. "Could you come to the house right away? It's important." Caleb's stomach clenched. "Is Anna okay?" "She's fine. She's at her piano lesson. But there's someone here who needs to speak with you. It really can't wait." 20 minutes later, Caleb pulled up to the mansion in his work truck, still wearing his oil-stained coveralls. He hadn't even taken time to change, though now he wished he had as he noticed the sleek black Mercedes parked in the circular drive. Mrs. Whitaker met him at the door, her face drawn with worry. "They're waiting in the study," she said quietly, leading him down a hallway lined with imposing family portraits. The dark wooden floors gleamed, making Caleb acutely aware of his work boots. The study was a formal room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and heavy leather furniture. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he reviewed some papers. Another man younger, but just as formally dressed, stood by the window, his arms crossed. Mrs. Whitaker cleared her throat. "Mr. Harper is here, Mr. Davidson." The older man looked up, studying Caleb with sharp eyes. "Ah, yes. Please, have a seat, Mr. Harper." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing the desk. I'm James Davidson, the family attorney. This is Charles Blackwood, Emily's brother. Charles didn't move from his spot by the window, merely giving Caleb a cold nod. Caleb sat down, feeling like he was being called to the principal's office. His work clothes seemed to absorb all the elegant touches around him: the oriental rug, the antique globe, the oil paintings in gilded frames. Mr. Harper, Davidson began, removing his glasses. I understand you've recently become aware of Anna's existence. Yes, sir, just a few days ago. And you've verified your late wife Emily was her mother? Caleb nodded. Anna has a locket with our picture in it, and the timing. It fits. Emily and I weren't married then, but… Yes, well, Davidson interrupted, shuffling some papers. That brings us to the matter at hand. Are you aware of the Blackwood family's position in this community? Caleb shook his head. The Blackwoods are one of the oldest families in the state. Their business holdings are substantial. Emily's grandfather, Jonathan Blackwood, passed away last month, leaving a rather complex will. Davidson paused, glancing at Charles. The bulk of the estate, early $40 million in assets, was left to his only great-grandchild, Anna. The number hit Caleb like a physical blow. He gripped the arms of his chair, trying to steady himself. However, Davidson continued, there are conditions. The inheritance must be managed by a legal guardian until Anna turns 25. This guardian would have considerable control over the estate's resources and Anna's upbringing. Charles finally spoke, his voice sharp as cut glass. Which brings us to you, Mr. Harper, a mechanic. He made it sound like a dirty word. Living in a rental house, working double shifts to make ends meet. Hardly the sort of environment suitable for a Blackwood heir. Caleb's face flushed hot. Now wait just a minute. Mr. Harper, Davidson cut in smoothly. What my client means is that Anna's future requires certain considerations. Private schools, social connections, financial guidance, the kind of advantages the Blackwood family can provide. She needs her father, Caleb said firmly. Charles gave a bitter laugh. Father? You didn't even know she existed until last week. I've been part of her life since she was born. I was there when Emily… He stopped abruptly, turning back to the window. Davidson cleared his throat. Mr. Blackwood intends to file for full custody of Anna. Given the circumstances, he believes it's in her best interest to remain within the family that has always provided for her. You can't do that, Caleb said, his voice hoarse. I'm her father. A father who was completely absent for 8 years. Charles snapped. Who lives paycheck to paycheck? Who can barely support the one child he has, let alone provide Anna with the life she deserves? I may not be rich, Caleb stood up, his hands shaking, but I can give her something just as important, love. A family, a brother who already adores her. Mr. Harper, Davidson said, his tone gentler now, no one doubts your good intentions, but the courts will look at practical matters, financial stability, educational opportunities, consistent home environment. Mr. Blackwood can offer Anna advantages you simply cannot. So that's it? Caleb's voice cracked. You're just going to take her away? She's not some company asset you can transfer around. We're doing what's best for Anna, Charles said coldly. My sister would have wanted… Don't. Caleb's quiet word cut through the air like a knife. Don't you dare tell me what Emily would have wanted. She was my wife. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Mrs. Whitaker, who had been hovering by the door, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Davidson shuffled his papers again. The custody hearing is scheduled for next month. Until then, you may continue your supervised visits with Anna, provided they take place here at the house. He held out a thick envelope. These are the legal documents. I suggest you review them with an attorney. Caleb took the envelope, his hands numb. The paper felt heavy, like it was weighted with all his fears and hopes for Anna's future. That will be all, Mr. Harper. Charles dismissed him, still staring out the window. The drive home seemed to take hours. Caleb's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as his mind raced. $40 million. Private schools. Social connections. How could he compete with that? But then he remembered Anna's face when she asked about Emily, the way she'd clung to his leg begging him to come back. How naturally she and Luke had played together in the garden. Some things were worth more than money. Some fights had to be fought, no matter the odds. The envelope sat on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb, filled with legal language that could tear his newly discovered daughter away from him. This wasn't just about getting to know Anna anymore. It was about protecting her future, about keeping her with the family that would love her for who she was, not what she was worth. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight, but Caleb couldn't sleep. Luke had gone to bed hours ago, leaving dirty cookie-baking dishes in the sink evidence of their planned visit to Anna tomorrow. But Caleb's mind was too full of lawyers and million-dollar inheritances to think about cookies. He stood in his bedroom, staring at the closet's top shelf. There, behind old winter sweaters and a stack of Luke's outgrown clothes, sat a battered shoebox he hadn't touched in years. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled it down. The box was dusty, its corners soft with age. Inside, carefully bundled with rubber bands, were Emily's letters and photos memories he'd packed away when the pain of losing her was still too fresh. The familiar scent of her perfume, faded but still there, drifted up as he lifted the lid. Caleb settled cross-legged on his bed, the box beside him. The first bundle of letters was from their courtship, tied with a faded blue ribbon. He set those aside. The next stack was thicker letters Emily had written to her family during their early marriage, but never sent. His fingers found a photo tucked between the pages. Emily sat in their old backyard, pregnant with Luke, her face glowing as she smiled at the camera. Caleb remembered taking that picture, how she laughed and told him to wait while she fixed her hair. He traced her face with his fingertip, his throat tight. The first letter was dated just after they'd met. Dear Mother, I know you're angry about my decision to leave school, but Caleb is different from anyone I've ever known. He doesn't care about social status or family connection. When he looks at me, he sees Minot the Blackwood name or the trust fund. I wish you could understand. Caleb's hands shook as he unfolded another letter. Charles, you call my choice unforgivable. But what's truly unforgivable is how this family values appearances over love. I won't raise my child the way we were raised in that cold mansion with nannies and tutors, but no warmth. Anna deserves better. Anna! Caleb's heart skipped. This must have been written before Emily gave her up. He dug deeper into the box, looking for more mentions of his newfound daughter. A small diary emerged from the bottom, its leather cover cracked and worn. Inside, Emily's familiar handwriting filled the pages with thoughts she'd never shared. The hardest thing I've ever done was placing Anna with a foster family. Mother says it's for the best that a child born before marriage would ruin our family's reputation. But every night, I dream of her tiny fingers wrapped around mine in the hospital. How can protecting the family name be more important than a mother's love? Caleb wiped his eyes, reading on. Met Caleb today at his garage. My car didn't really need fixing. I just wanted to see him again. He has such gentle hands for a mechanic, and when he smiles, his whole face lights up. I think I'm falling in love. But how do I tell him about Anna? What if he judges me the way my family does? Another entry, dated 2 years later. Married 6 months now. Every day I want to tell Caleb about Anna. He's so wonderful with children, I see it when neighborhood kids bring their bikes to the garage. He'd love her instantly, I know he would. But Mother threatens to cut off Anna's trust fund if I tell anyone. She says it's better this way, that Anna will have advantages I can't provide. But what about love? What about family? The next pages were filled with similar struggles. Emily's joy in her life with Caleb, warring with her guilt about keeping Anna secret. Then came entries from when she was sick, the handwriting growing shakier. The doctors say it's spreading. All I can think about is Anna, and how I'll never get to tell Caleb the truth. He deserves to know he has a daughter. Anna deserves to know her father. But I'm so afraid not of Caleb's reaction, but of my family. They've controlled this secret for so long. The final entry was barely legible. My dearest Caleb, if you ever read this, I'm sorry. Sorry for not being braver, for not telling you about our beautiful girl. The doctors say I don't have much time left. I've asked Mrs. Whitaker to look after Anna, to protect her from becoming what my family wanted me to be, cold, proper, concerned only with appearances. Please find her someday. Please love her the way I know you can. Caleb closed the diary, his vision blurred with tears. The bedside lamp cast a warm glow over the scattered letters and photos fragments of Emily's hidden struggles, her fierce love for both her children, her fear of her family's rigid expectations. He picked up the photo of pregnant Emily again, studying her smile. She'd been carrying such a heavy secret, torn between her love for him and her fears about her family's control. Now he understood why Mrs. Whitaker had seemed unsurprised to see him that rainy afternoon she'd been waiting, honoring Emily's final wishes. Gathering the letters carefully, Caleb placed them back in the shoebox. He needed to know more about the trust fund, about the years of Anna's life he'd missed, about what really happened between Emily and her family. Before he could fight Charles Blackwood for custody, he needed to understand the whole story. The truth was there, hidden in old papers and faded memories. Tomorrow, he would start asking questions. But tonight, he held on to one simple fact. Emily had wanted him to find Anna. She believed in his love, even when she couldn't bring herself to test it. He placed the shoebox back on the shelf, but kept the diary on his nightstand. There were more answers to find, more pieces of the puzzle to put together. But at least now, he knew Emily had wanted their family whole. She just hadn't lived long enough to make it happen herself. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mansion's manicured lawn as Caleb's old truck rumbled up the driveway. Luke sat beside him, clutching the container of homemade chocolate chip cookies they'd baked the night before. Neither spoke much, both lost in thought about the conversation ahead. Mrs. Whitaker opened the door before they could ring the bell. Her usually composed face showed signs of worry, dark circles under her eyes, suggesting a sleepless night. "She's in the garden with Muffin," she said softly. "I haven't told her anything yet." They found Anna sitting cross-legged on a stone bench, tossing a small ball for the puppy. Her face lit up when she saw them, and she ran to give Caleb a hug, her small arms barely reaching around his waist. "You came back!" "Of course we did," Luke said, holding up the cookie container. "We even brought treats." Anna's eyes widened at the sight of the cookies. "Did you make them yourselves?" "Sure did," Caleb said, trying to keep his voice light despite the heaviness in his chest. "Though Luke did most of the work. I'm better with engines than ovens." They settled on the bench, Anna between them, while Muffin sniffed hopefully at the cookie container. Mrs. Whitaker brought out glasses of lemonade, then stood nearby, her hands clasped tightly together. Caleb watched Anna bite into a cookie, chocolate smearing the corners of her mouth. She looked so much like Emily in that moment, the same delighted smile, the same little crinkle at the corner of her eyes. His heart ached with the need to protect her. "Anna," he said gently, "there's something important we need to talk about." He paused, searching for the right words. "How do you explain custody battles to an 8-year-old? You know how your mommy Emily was my wife?" Anna nodded, licking chocolate from her fingers. "Mrs. Whitaker showed me the pictures." "Well, your mommy had a brother, your Uncle Charles. Caleb took a deep breath. "He thinks you should go live with him instead of staying here with Mrs. Whitaker." Anna's small body stiffened. "But I don't want to live with Uncle Charles. He never visits. He just sends presents at Christmas." Her voice trembled slightly. "And now I have you and Luke." Luke reached over and squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, Squirt. Dad's not going to let anyone take you away." Caleb nodded firmly. "That's right. There might be some difficult times ahead, meetings with lawyers and judges, but I promise you, Anna, I'm going to fight for you, no matter what." "Really?" Anna's hazel eyes, so like Emily's, searched his face. "You want me?" The simple question hit Caleb like a physical blow. He slid off the bench to kneel in front of her, taking her small hands in his. "Of course I want you. You're my daughter. I know I missed the first 8 years of your life, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Tears welled in Anna's eyes. "But Uncle Charles has a big house in the city, and lots of money." "Money isn't what makes a family," Caleb said firmly. "Love does, and you've got plenty of that right here." He glanced at Luke, who nodded in agreement. "Besides," Luke added, "our house might be smaller, but it's got something better than money, a tree perfect for building a fort, and Dad's pretty good with tools." A small smile tugged at Anna's lips. "Really? I've never had a fort." "We could build one together," Caleb suggested. "All 3 of us." Mrs. Whitaker stepped forward then, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Mr. Harper, Caleb, I want you to know that I'll help however I can. I was there when Emily." She paused, composing herself. I know what she wanted for Anna, and it wasn't the life Charles and his wife would provide. Caleb stood, his knees creaking slightly. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker. Your support means everything. I've kept detailed records," she continued. "Every visit Charles missed, every time he canceled plans with Anna. And I have letters from Emily discussing her concerns about her brother's attitudes." She straightened her shoulders. "I'll testify to all of it, if needed." Anna tugged at Caleb's sleeve. "Does this mean I might get to live with you and Luke?" "That's what we're going to try for," Caleb said carefully. "But whatever happens, you need to remember something important." He crouched down again, meeting her eyes. "You are loved. By me, by Luke, by Mrs. Whitaker. Nothing your uncle does can change that. Promise?" Anna's voice was small but hopeful. "I promise." Caleb pulled her into a hug, feeling her small arms wrapped tightly around his neck. Over her shoulder, he saw Luke watching them, his teenage attempt at coolness softening into a genuine smile. They spent the rest of the morning in the garden, sharing cookies and stories. Luke taught Anna how to make muffin rollover for treats, while Caleb listened to Mrs. Whitaker's detailed account of the past 8 years, Anna's first steps, her love of drawing, her quiet resilience in the face of Charles's periodic attempts to mold her into his idea of a proper Blackwood heir. When it was time to leave, Anna clung to both Caleb and Luke, reluctant to let them go. "Will you come back tomorrow?" "Wild horses couldn't keep us away," Caleb assured her, ruffling her hair. "Maybe we can start planning that fort." As they walked to the truck, Mrs. Whitaker touched Caleb's arm. "Charles won't make this easy," she warned quietly. "He sees Anna as a possession, not a person. The Blackwood family legacy means everything to him." "Then he's missing what really matters," Caleb replied, watching Anna wave from the doorway. Emily knew that. That's why she chose a different path. The drive home was quiet, both father and son lost in thought. Finally, Luke spoke up. "We're gonna win, right, Dad?" Caleb gripped the steering wheel tighter, thinking of Emily's diary, of Anna's trusting eyes, of all the years he'd missed. "We have to. Son, we have to." The Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a picnic. Caleb had spent the previous evening preparing sandwiches, carefully cutting the crusts off just as Mrs. Whitaker had mentioned Anna preferred. Luke had packed a cooler with juice boxes and fruit, while also gathering their old fishing rods from the garage. Caleb's truck bounced along the familiar road to the mansion, the picnic basket secure between him and Luke. His son fiddled with the radio, finally settling on a cheerful country station. "Think she's ever been fishing before?" Luke asked, tapping his fingers on the dashboard. "Mrs. Whitaker says she hasn't," Caleb replied. "Apparently, the Blackwoods aren't much for outdoor activities." They pulled up to the mansion just as Anna burst through the front door, Muffin bounding at her heels. She wore overalls and pink sneakers, her hair in slightly uneven pigtails that suggested she'd done them herself. Mrs. Whitaker followed more slowly, carrying a small backpack. "You came!" Anna called out, running to meet them. "I've been ready since sunrise." Caleb chuckled, helping her climb into the truck's cab. "Sunrise? That's mighty early." "I couldn't sleep," Anna admitted, settling between him and Luke. "I've never been on a real picnic before, or fishing." Mrs. Whitaker handed the backpack to Caleb. "Extra clothes, sunscreen, and her favorite stuffed bear just in case." She smiled warmly. "Have fun, dear. And remember what we talked about." Anna nodded solemnly. "No swimming without my life jacket, even if the water looks shallow." The drive to the lake was filled with Anna's excited chatter. She asked dozens of questions about fishing, each one more detailed than the last. Luke answered patiently, explaining about bait and casting techniques while Muffin dozed in Anna's lap. The lake sparkled under the morning sun when they arrived. A few other families were scattered along the shoreline, but Caleb's favorite spot, a quiet inlet shaded by old oak trees, was empty. They unloaded their gear, Luke carrying the cooler while Caleb balanced the fishing rods and picnic basket. "Can I help?" Anna asked eagerly, bouncing on her toes. "You've got the most important job," Luke told her seriously. "You're in charge of Muffin." The puppy wagged his tail at the sound of his name, tugging slightly at his leash as Anna gripped it firmly. She took her responsibility seriously, carefully guiding Muffin around rocks and fallen branches. They set up their spot under the largest oak tree, spreading out an old quilt Caleb had brought from home. Luke showed Anna how to bait her hook while Caleb got the rest of their gear ready. The little girl's face scrunched up in determination as she tried to copy Luke's movements. "Like this?" she asked, holding up her line. "Perfect," Luke praised. "Now watch how I cast." He demonstrated the motion slowly, then helped guide Anna's arms through the same movement. Her first cast went wild, the line tangling in nearby branches, but Anna didn't get discouraged. She tried again and again, her tongue poking out in concentration, until finally her bobber landed in the water with a satisfying plop. "I did it," she squealed, then quickly covered her mouth. "Oops, do we have to be quiet so we don't scare the fish?" Caleb smiled, remembering teaching Luke to fish years ago. "They don't mind a little talking, just no jumping or splashing." They settled into a peaceful rhythm, the three of them sitting side by side on the bank. Muffin lay nearby, occasionally lifting his head to watch the bobbers dance on the water's surface. Anna leaned against Caleb's arm, her small face serious as she watched for any sign of fish. "Dad," she said absently, focused on her line. How long before? She froze, realizing what she'd said, and looked up at him with wide eyes. Caleb's heart swelled. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, giving them a gentle squeeze. Sometimes it takes a while, he said softly, answering her unfinished question. We just have to be patient. Anna relaxed against him, a small smile playing at her lips. Luke caught Caleb's eye over her head and grinned, giving a tiny thumbs up. When lunchtime rolled around, they hadn't caught any fish, but nobody seemed to mind. They spread out their feast on the quilt, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, no crusts, apple slices, potato chips, and cookies. Luke had baked the night before. These are even better than last time, Anna declared, munching on a cookie. Secret ingredient, Luke told her with a wink. Extra chocolate chips. After lunch, they took turns throwing a tennis ball for Muffin. The puppy's enthusiasm made up for his lack of skill. He often ran right past the ball, barking excitedly before remembering what he was supposed to be doing. No, Muffin, like this, Anna demonstrated, crawling on all fours to pick up the ball with her mouth. Luke doubled over laughing while Caleb quickly snapped a picture with his phone. They spent the afternoon teaching Muffin to sit and fetch properly. Anna proved to be a natural trainer, her voice firm but kind as she repeated commands. By the end of the day, the puppy had mastered sit and made progress on stay, though fetch still needed work. The sun was starting to dip toward the horizon when Caleb finally called it a day. They packed up their gear, Anna carefully helping to wind up the fishing lines while Luke folded the quilt. Muffin had worn himself out and dozed in the back seat during the drive home. Anna's giggles filled the truck's cab as Luke told silly stories about his own fishing mishaps as a younger kid. Her laughter was infectious, bright, and uninhibited, so different from the shy, hesitant child they'd first met at the mansion door. Can we do this again? She asked as they pulled up to the mansion. Maybe next time we'll catch a real fish. Count on it, Caleb promised, helping her gather her things. We'll make you a master angler yet. Mrs. Whitaker met them at the door, smiling at Anna's animated description of the day's adventures. The little girl hugged both Luke and Caleb tightly before heading inside with Muffin trailing sleepily behind her. Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker said quietly. I haven't seen her this happy in, well, ever. On the drive home, Caleb couldn't stop smiling, the sound of Anna's laughter still ringing in his ears. The day had been perfect not because of any fish caught or even the beautiful weather, but because for a few precious hours, they'd felt like a real family. Luke turned the radio on low, humming along. Good day, Dad? The best, Caleb replied, his heart full. The memory of Anna calling him Dad played over in his mind, warming him from the inside out. It hadn't been forced or planned, just a natural moment of trust and belonging. Caleb pulled into the mansion's circular driveway, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. He'd come straight from work, still wearing his Navy mechanic's uniform with Harper's Auto stitched above the pocket. Miss Whitaker had called earlier, saying she'd found something important while organizing Anna's room. The front door opened before he could ring the bell. Mrs. Whitaker stood there, clutching a small wooden box to her chest. Her usually composed face showed signs of worry. Anna's at her piano lesson, she said quietly, ushering him inside. I thought it best we talk privately. They settled in the mansion's library, a cozy room lined with built-in shelves. Unlike the formal parlor, this space felt lived in, with worn leather chairs and children's books mixed among the classics. Mrs. Whitaker placed the box on a small table between them. I found this while helping Anna organize her closet, she explained, running her fingers along the box's carved edge. It was tucked away in the back, wrapped in an old sweater. I probably shouldn't have opened it, but I recognized Emily's handwriting on the top. Caleb leaned forward, studying the simple wooden container. It was about the size of a shoebox, dark wood worn smooth with age. Someone Emily, he assumed, had carved a small heart in one corner. There are letters inside, Mrs. Whitaker continued. Many of them, but this one, she pulled out a cream-colored envelope with his name written in Emily's familiar flowing script. This one is addressed to you. Caleb's hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope. The paper felt delicate, as if it might crumble under his touch. He carefully broke the seal, unfolding pages filled with Emily's handwriting. I'll give you some privacy, Mrs. Whitaker said softly, standing. Take all the time you need. Once alone, Caleb took a deep breath and began to read. My dearest Caleb, if you're reading this, then you've found out about Anna. I've written this letter 100 times in my head and a dozen times on paper, but I've never found the courage to send it. How do you tell the man you love that you've kept such a secret? Anna was born before I met you, during the darkest time of my life. My family, especially my brother Charles, had such rigid expectations. When I became pregnant, they were furious. They threatened to cut me off completely unless I handled the situation quietly. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I placed Anna in care, believing it was temporary, just until I could stand on my own feet, away from my family's influence. But they made sure I couldn't find work in town. They froze my accounts. They did everything possible to control me. Then I met you, Caleb. You showed me what real love looks like: unconditional, accepting, pure. You never cared about my family's money or status. You loved me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. Caleb paused, wiping moisture from his eyes. He could almost hear Emily's voice speaking the words, could picture her writing late at night, pouring her heart onto these pages. I wanted to tell you about Anna so many times. That first Christmas we spent together, when you talked about wanting children someday. The day you proposed, promising to love me no matter what. Our wedding day, when you said nothing from the past mattered anymore. But fear held me back. Not fear of your reaction. I knew in my heart you would understand. I feared what my family would do. Charles had made it clear that if I ever tried to reclaim Anna, he would use every resource, every connection, every dollar to stop me. And after losing her once, I couldn't bear the thought of finding her only to lose her again. I've been saving money, secretly gathering evidence of their threats and manipulation. I planned to tell you everything once we were strong enough to fight them together, but time slipped away so quickly. And now, the next few lines were shaky, written with a less steady hand. Caleb realized with a start that Emily must have written this part after her diagnosis, when she knew her time was running short. The doctors say I don't have long, my love. And still, I can't find the courage to tell you face to face. What kind of mother am I, to leave this world without fighting for my daughter? What kind of wife, to leave you with such a burden? But I know you, Caleb Harper. I know your heart. If fate ever brings Anna into your life, you'll love her as fiercely as I do. You'll give her the home and family she deserves. You'll protect her from those who would use her for their own gain. I've left clues where I could. The locket, with our picture. Letters to her, telling her about you, about us. I pray someday she'll understand why I made the choices I did, even if I don't fully understand them myself. The truth is, I failed her. I failed you both by staying silent. But you, my wonderful, kind-hearted Caleb, you never fail anyone. You fix what's broken. You heal what's hurt. You love without conditions or limits. If you ever find her, love her for both of us. Caleb lowered the letter, tears flowing freely now. His fingers traced Emily's signature at the bottom, remembering how she used to sign little notes in his lunchbox, always with a tiny heart dotting the "I" in her name. The rest of the box contained more letters, some to Anna, describing her early days, some to Emily's parents, pleading for understanding, and many that seemed to be Emily's private thoughts and fears. But it was the last line of his letter that kept echoing in Caleb's mind. If you ever find her, love her for both of us. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, carefully folding the letter and placing it back in its envelope. Emily's words had cracked open his grief anew, but they'd also strengthened his resolve. He understood now why this fight mattered so much, not just for Anna's future, but for Emily's memory, for the justice she never got to see, for the family they should have been all along. The courthouse loomed before Caleb, its stone steps worn smooth by decades of footsteps. He tugged at his borrowed tie, wishing he felt as confident as Luke kept telling him to be. His best suit bought years ago for Emily's funeral felt tight around the shoulders, a reminder of how long it had been since he'd needed to dress formally. "You've got this, Dad," Luke said beside him, looking sharp in his school blazer. At 16, his son carried himself with a quiet strength that reminded Caleb so much of Emily. Mrs. Whitaker waited at the top of the steps, her gray hair neatly pinned back, wearing a conservative navy dress. Anna stood beside her, small fingers wrapped around her guardian's hand, wearing a pale yellow dress that made her look even younger than her 8 years. "Good morning," Mrs. Whitaker said warmly. "Are we all ready?" Caleb nodded, though his throat felt too dry to speak. The courthouse's heavy wooden doors creaked as they entered, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Their lawyer, Patricia Martinez, met them in the hallway outside courtroom 3. "Remember," Patricia said, straightening Caleb's tie with motherly efficiency, "just be honest. Speak from the heart." The judge needs to see the real youth, the hardworking father who puts his children first. They filed into the courtroom, the polished wooden benches nearly empty, except for a few observers and court staff. On the other side of the aisle, Charles Blackwood sat with his expensive legal team, his steel gray suit probably worth more than Caleb's truck. The bailiff called them to order, and Judge Eleanor Martinezno, relation to Patricia, she'd assured them took her place at the bench. Her kind face carried the wisdom of decades on the bench, though her eyes remained sharp as she reviewed the preliminary documents. This is a hearing for temporary custody arrangements regarding Anna Blackwood Harper, the judge announced. We'll hear testimony from both sides. Mrs. Whitaker, please take the stand. Mrs. Whitaker walked forward, her sensible shoes clicking softly on the floor. After being sworn in, she settled into the witness chair, hands folded in her lap. Mrs. Whitaker, Patricia began, how long have you been Anna's guardian? 6 years, Mrs. Whitaker replied clearly, since she was 2 years old. And in the time since Mr. Harper learned about Anna, what have you observed about their relationship? Mrs. Whitaker's face softened. I've seen a natural father-daughter bond develop. Mr. Harper visits every chance he gets, despite working long hours at his garage. He reads to her, helps with her homework, and most importantly, he listens to her. Anna has blossomed since meeting him. She smiles more, laughs more freely. Charles's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Whitaker, isn't it true that Mr. Harper's financial situation is precarious? That he rents rather than owns his home? Objection, Patricia called. Relevance? I'll allow it, the judge said, but counsel should be mindful that financial status alone does not determine fitness for custody. Mrs. Whitaker lifted her chin. Mr. Harper works honest hours at an honest job. He's never missed a visit with Anna, never failed to provide for his son Luke. Some things matter more than money. Next came Luke's testimony. He sat tall in the witness chair, speaking clearly despite his obvious nervousness. How do you feel about potentially sharing your father's attention with Anna? Patricia asked. Luke smiled. I always wanted a sister. When Dad told me about Anna, it felt right, like a missing piece falling into place. We already feel like family. The morning continued with more testimony character witnesses from Caleb's church, Luke's school principal praising his academic performance despite their modest means. Even the local librarian speaking about how Caleb had organized community reading programs. Finally, Caleb himself took the stand. His hands trembled slightly as he was sworn in, but when he looked at Anna's hopeful face, a calm settled over him. Mr. Harper, Patricia began, why do you want custody of Anna? Caleb took a deep breath. Because she's my daughter. Not by birth, maybe, but by heart. Emily, my late wife, couldn't tell me about Anna before she died, but she wanted us to be a family. I can't change the past, can't give Anna back the years we missed, but I can give her a future filled with love. That's what Emily would have wanted. He spoke about his work ethic, his dedication to Luke's upbringing, his plans to convert their rental spare room into a space for Anna. The words flowed naturally, honestly. Charles's lawyer tried to paint him as unstable, focusing on his long work hours and modest income. But Caleb remained steady, explaining how he'd already arranged flexible hours and had support from his community. After both sides presented their closing arguments, Judge Martinez called a brief recess. Those 15 minutes felt like hours as they waited in the hallway, Anna holding both Caleb's and Luke's hands. When they returned to the courtroom, the judge's expression was thoughtful but decided. Having reviewed all testimony and evidence, she began, I find that the best interest of the child would be served by granting temporary joint custody to Mr. Harper and Mrs. Whitaker, with primary residence remaining at the current location, while Mr. Harper has liberal visitation rights, including overnight stays once suitable accommodation is arranged. The formal legal language continued, but Caleb barely heard it. Anna had already launched herself from her seat, wrapping her arms around his waist in a tight hug. Luke joined them, and for a moment, they stood together, a family emerging from the shadows of the past. That evening, after a celebration dinner of pizza and ice cream at the mansion, Caleb helped Anna get ready for bed. Her room was pink and white, with fairy lights strung across the ceiling and books scattered everywhere. Muffin curled up at the foot of her bed, tail thumping happily. Time for sleep, sweetheart, Caleb said, tucking the blankets around her. Will you read me a story? Anna asked, reaching for a well-worn copy of The Secret Garden from her nightstand. Of course. Caleb settled into the chair beside her bed, opening to the bookmark. As he read about Mary finding her way through the maze to the hidden garden, he noticed Anna's eyes growing heavy. "Daddy?" she murmured, already half asleep. "Yes, Anna? I'm glad you found me." Caleb gently kissed her forehead, emotion catching in his throat. "Me too, sweetheart, me too." The morning sun painted golden streaks across the county fairgrounds entrance as Caleb pulled into the dusty parking lot. The familiar scents of popcorn and sugar wafted through the air, mixing with the excited chatter of families heading toward the gates. Anna practically bounced in the back seat, her pink sundress dotted with tiny daisies, while Luke helped her unbuckle her seatbelt. "Can we go on all the rides?" Anna asked, her eyes wide as she took in the towering Ferris wheel silhouetted against the blue sky. "Well, maybe not all of them," Caleb chuckled, retrieving his wallet from the glove compartment, "but we'll try our best." They made their way to the entrance, Anna skipping between Caleb and Luke, holding both their hands. The ticket seller, a grandmotherly woman with silver hair, smiled warmly as she handed them their bright paper wristbands. "First stop?" Luke asked, studying the colorful map they'd been given. "Ferris wheel." Anna pointed eagerly at the massive structure that dominated the fairground skyline. Its red and white cars rotated lazily in the morning light, offering glimpses of the surrounding countryside. The line moved quickly, and soon they were being ushered into one of the swaying cars. Anna wedged herself between Caleb and Luke, gripping the safety bar with both hands as they began to rise. Her initial nervousness melted into wonder as their car climbed higher. "Look!" she gasped, pointing at the patchwork of fields stretching toward the horizon. "Everything's so tiny." Caleb watched her face, memorizing the way her eyes sparkled with delight. The breeze ruffled her honey-brown hair, Emily's hair, and for a moment, his heart ached with a bittersweet joy. After the Ferris wheel, they wandered through the fairground, stopping at various attractions. Luke proved surprisingly skilled at the ring toss, winning a small stuffed penguin that he immediately gave to Anna. She hugged it close, declaring it would be Muffin's new best friend. The smell of cotton candy drew them to a nearby stand, where Caleb bought 3 fluffy clouds of pink sugar. Anna's face soon bore traces of the sticky treat, and Luke couldn't help laughing as he helped her clean up with a napkin. "Dad, look!" Anna tugged at Caleb's sleeve, pointing to a game booth where dozens of colorful teddy bears hung from the ceiling. "Can we try that one?" The game seemed simple enough. Knock down 3 milk bottles with a baseball. Caleb paid for 3 tries, but his first 2 throws missed completely. "Here," Luke said, taking the last ball. "Let me show you the trick." He demonstrated the proper throwing motion to Anna, who watched intently. "You try," Luke encouraged, placing the ball in her small hands. Anna's tongue poked out in concentration as she wound up just as Luke had shown her. The ball flew straight and true, connecting with the bottom bottle. The entire stack tumbled with a satisfying clatter. "You did it," Luke cheered, lifting Anna onto his shoulders as she clutched her newly won prize, a honey-colored bear almost as big as she was. They continued through the fair, trying their luck at various games and sampling the endless array of treats. Anna insisted on sharing her funnel cake with both Caleb and Luke, carefully cutting it into 3 somewhat uneven pieces with her plastic fork. By mid-afternoon, they found themselves at the petting zoo. Anna moved from animal to animal, delighting in the soft fur of rabbits and the gentle nudging of baby goats. She told each animal about Muffin, promising to bring him stories of his farm cousins. "He's going to be so jealous," she giggled, scratching behind a sheep's ears. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky when they finally headed back to the parking lot. Anna's steps had grown slower, her energy waning after the excitement of the day. She clutched her bear in one arm, the stuffed penguin in the other, while Luke carried the small bag of other prizes they'd accumulated. Caleb helped her into the back seat, making sure she was securely buckled in. Before he could even start the engine, her eyes were already drooping. The gentle motion of the drive home soon had her fast asleep, her new bear serving as a pillow. Luke turned the radio down to a soft whisper, glancing back at his sleeping sister with a fond smile. "She had a good time today," he said quietly. Caleb nodded, checking the rearview mirror to see Anna's peaceful face. The setting sun cast long shadows across the road, and in the golden light, he could almost imagine Emily sitting beside him, sharing this moment of pure contentment. "Thank you," he whispered, his words meant for ears that could no longer hear them. "Thank you for this gift." The truck hummed along the familiar roads toward home, carrying its precious cargo of memories newly made and a family growing stronger with each passing day. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the garage windows as Caleb wiped grease from his hands. He'd just finished replacing a transmission, and the familiar work had helped keep his mind off the custody battle. The bell above the office door chimed, and he looked up to see a man in a crisp suit holding a thick manila envelope. "Mr. Caleb Harper?" the man asked, his voice formal and detached. "That's me," Caleb replied, reaching for a clean shop rag to wipe his hands more thoroughly. "You've been served." The man thrust the envelope forward and turned on his heel, leaving before Caleb could respond. The envelope felt heavy in Caleb's hands. His stomach churned as he recognized the law firm's name embossed in the corner, Charles's Attorneys. With trembling fingers, he broke the seal and pulled out a stack of documents. The first page made his heart sink. Motion to deny custody based on character evidence. Below that, in stark black type, were details he thought he'd left behind decades ago. Caleb's legs felt weak. He stumbled to his office chair and sat heavily. Papers spread across his desk. Police reports from 1,992 stared up at him, complete with his much younger mugshot. The bar fight that had seemed so important when he was 22 now felt like a lifetime ago. The bell chimed again, and this time it was Mike, his business partner, poking his head in. "Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Charles," Caleb managed, his voice rough. "He's dug up my past. That stupid bar fight from college." Mike moved closer, peering at the documents. "The one where you defended that kid from the bullies?" "Yeah." Caleb ran a hand through his graying hair. "But that's not how Charles is spinning it, according to these papers. I have a history of violence and reckless behavior." He picked up one of the pages, reading aloud. "The defendant's documented assault charge demonstrates an unstable nature, unsuitable for guardianship." "That's ridiculous," Mike exclaimed. "It was 30 years ago, and the charges were dropped." "Doesn't matter. It's ammunition for Charles." Caleb checked his watch. Luke would be home from baseball practice soon. "I need to tell Luke before he hears it from someone else." The drive home felt longer than usual. Caleb's truck rumbled down familiar streets while his mind raced through memories of that night. He'd been young and foolish, sure, but he'd stepped in to help a freshman being harassed by drunk seniors. The fight hadn't been his choice, but he'd finished it. Luke's beaten-up Corolla was already in the driveway when Caleb pulled up. He found his son in the kitchen, making a sandwich and still in his baseball uniform. "Hey, Dad," Luke said, then noticed his father's expression. "What's wrong?" Caleb placed the envelope on the kitchen table. "We need to talk." Luke sat down, sandwich forgotten. Caleb took the chair across from him, trying to find the right words. "Your Uncle Charles's lawyers served me with some papers today," he began. "They found some old records from before you were born, before I met your mom." "What kind of records?" Caleb took a deep breath. "When I was in college, I got arrested for being in a bar fight." Luke's eyes widened. "You? In a fight?" "It was a different time and I was a different person." Caleb leaned forward, elbows on the table. "There were these guys, seniors, picking on a freshman, pushing him around, trying to force him to drink. I told them to back off. They didn't like that." He could still remember the smell of stale beer and cigarettes, the sound of breaking glass. "One of them threw a punch. I defended myself. By the time the police arrived, tables were overturned, and I was the only one still standing." "What happened to the freshman?" Luke asked quietly. "He testified that I'd protected him. The charges were dropped." Caleb smiled sadly. "Your mom. She was working at the campus library then. She helped me file all the paperwork. That's how we met." Luke absorbed this for a moment. "So why is Uncle Charles bringing it up now?" "He's trying to prove I'm not fit to be Anna's guardian." Caleb's hands clenched into fists on the table. "He's painting me as some violent criminal who can't control himself." "But that's not fair," Luke protested. "It was one fight 30 years ago, and you were helping someone." "The law isn't always about fair," Caleb said. "Charles knows that. He's hoping the judge will see the arrest record and not look deeper." Luke stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the gathering dusk. "Does Anna know about this?" "Not yet. I'll have to tell her something, but—" Caleb trailed off, thinking of those innocent hazel eyes. "She's too young to understand all of it. What are we going to do?" Caleb stood and joined his son at the window. "We fight back with the truth. We show the judge who I really am, who we are as a family." "Mrs. Whitaker will help," Luke said. "And the guys from the garage. The whole town knows you, Dad. I hope that's enough. Caleb's reflection in the window looked tired, worried. The court date was less than 2 weeks away. Charles's legal team would have more time to dig, to twist old stories into new weapons. Luke turned to face his father. Remember what you always tell me about baseball? It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about getting back up when you strike out. Despite his fears, Caleb felt a smile tugging at his lips. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Luke grabbed his forgotten sandwich. Want half? Caleb accepted the offered food, and they ate in comfortable silence. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking time in the growing shadows. Tomorrow, he'd need to call his lawyer, prepare responses, gather character witnesses. But for now, his son's quiet support was enough to keep the fear at bay. The sound of a car door outside made them both look up. Through the window, they could see Mrs. Whitaker's sedan pulling into the driveway next door. She'd promised to bring Anna for dinner tomorrow night. The thought of those weekly dinners ending, of Anna being taken away, made Caleb's chest tighten. We won't let them take her, Luke said, as if reading his thoughts. We're her family now. Caleb nodded, gathering the court documents and sliding them back into the envelope. Charles might have money and power, and teams of lawyers, but Caleb had something stronger. Love for a little girl who needed him, and the determination to prove he deserved to be her father. The morning sun cast long shadows across Caleb's kitchen floor as he nursed his second cup of coffee. His eyes were heavy from a restless night of worry. The court documents from Charles still lay on the counter where he'd left them, a constant reminder of the battle ahead. A knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. Opening it, he found Sarah Miller, his next-door neighbor for the past 15 years, holding a steaming casserole dish. I heard what happened, she said, pushing past him into the kitchen. That Charles is a piece of work, isn't he? Well, you're not facing this alone. Before Caleb could respond, more knocks echoed through the house. Tom and Betty Johnson from across the street appeared with fresh-baked cookies. Behind them came the Hendersons, the Patels, and the Wilsons, all carrying food and determined expressions. Sit down, Caleb, Betty instructed, taking charge of his kitchen. We're having a proper breakfast, and then we're going to talk about how we can help. Overwhelmed, Caleb sank into a chair. His small kitchen quickly filled with familiar faces and the comforting smells of home cooking. These were people he'd helped over the years, fixing their cars, lending tools, clearing their driveways after snowstorm. Remember when you stayed up all night fixing my truck before Amy's wedding? Tom asked, passing him a plate of scrambled eggs. You wouldn't take a dime for it, said it was a wedding present. Or the time you taught my Tommy how to change his oil, Mrs. Henderson added. That boy needed a good role model, and you stepped right up. Sarah pulled out her phone. I've already called Pastor Mike at First Baptist. He's organizing a petition for character references. Half the congregation is signed up to help. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Mike from the garage, accompanied by 3 other mechanics Caleb had mentored over the years. Boss, Mike said, his usual gruff manner softened with concern. We've got your back. Every customer who comes through today is hearing about what a stand-up guy you are. We're getting signatures, testimonials, whatever you need. Caleb's throat tightened. You all don't have to. Yes, we do, Betty interrupted firmly. We've watched you raise Luke alone, working double shifts, never complaining. Now we find out you've got a daughter who needs you? Well, this town takes care of its own. More neighbors arrived throughout the morning. Mrs. Chin from the grocery store brought dim sum and stories about Caleb helping her son with car troubles. Old Mr. Peterson hobbled in with his cane, insisting on telling everyone how Caleb checked on him daily during last winter's big freeze. Luke came downstairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and stopped short at the crowd in their kitchen. What's going on? Your daddy's got more friends than he realized, Sarah explained, pulling him into a hug. By noon, the petition had over 100 signatures. Pastor Mike arrived with more sheets filled with names and personal testimonials. The Sunday school teachers all want to speak as character witnesses, he said. They've seen how you are with the kids in the youth program. Caleb sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by people he'd known for years, but never realized how much they cared. The stack of signatures grew higher as more neighbors dropped by. Each person had a story. Some small kindness Caleb had forgotten, but they hadn't. Remember when you fixed my bike? Tommy Henderson, now a teenager, poked his head in. You showed me how to do it myself next time. Mom says you're always teaching people to fish instead of just giving them fish, or something like that. Mrs. Patel brought samosas and righteous indignation. This Charles person? He thinks money makes a good parent? I've seen you with Luke since he was small. That boy turned out wonderful because of you. The afternoon wore on, and still people came. Some just stopped by to sign the petition. Others stayed to share memories and offer support. Caleb's refrigerator slowly filled with casseroles and containers of food, enough to feed an army. You won't have to cook for weeks, Betty declared, reorganizing his freezer to make everything fit. Around 4 o'clock, Mrs. Whitaker arrived with Anna. The little girl's eyes widened at the crowd in their kitchen, but she ran straight to Caleb for a hug. "Look at that," Sarah whispered to Betty. "Blood or not, that's his daughter." Mrs. Whitaker added her own signature to the petition. "I've been Anna's guardian for 5 years," she wrote in her neat handwriting. "In just these few weeks with Caleb, I've seen her smile more than ever before." As the sun began to set, the crowd finally thinned. Luke helped clean up while Caleb walked the last few neighbors to their cars, accepting hugs and promises of continued support. Back in the kitchen, he found Anna standing on a chair, carefully pinning the thick stack of petitions to the refrigerator with alphabet magnets. "Can I put it here, Daddy?" she asked, the word Daddy still new and precious on her tongue. "That's perfect, sweetheart," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. The pages covered nearly half the refrigerator, hundreds of names, countless stories, all testifying to the kind of man he was. Not the angry young man from that decades-old police report, but the father, neighbor, and friend he'd become. Luke squeezed his shoulder. "See, Dad? You're not alone." Caleb looked at the petition on his fridge, at his son's proud face, at Anna carefully arranging the magnets just so. The fear wasn't gone, but it felt smaller now, manageable. Charles might have money and lawyers, but Caleb had something perhaps more valuable, a community that believed in him. "We're going to win," Anna declared, with the simple certainty of childhood, patting the petition one last time before climbing down from her chair. Mrs. Whitaker checked her watch. "Time to head home, Anna. Say goodbye to your father and brother." Anna hugged them both tightly, then skipped to the door, Muffin trotting at her heels. Over her shoulder, Mrs. Whitaker gave Caleb a reassuring smile. "The truth will out," she said softly. "Good people know good people when they see them." After they left, Caleb stood in his kitchen, reading the names and messages on his fridge. Each signature represented someone willing to stand up and say he deserved to be Anna's father. The weight of their faith in him felt both humbling and strengthening. Tomorrow, he'd call his lawyer and start organizing all these testimonials. But for now, he simply stood there, letting the love and support of his community wash over him, more determined than ever to see this through. The courthouse loomed before Caleb, its brick facade softened by morning sunlight. He straightened his borrowed tie, Pastor Mike's contribution to making him look more official, and took a deep breath. Luke stood beside him, also wearing his Sunday best, while Anna held tight to Mrs. Whitaker's hand. "Ready?" Luke asked, adjusting his own clip-on tie. Caleb nodded, unable to find words past the lump in his throat. Their lawyer, Sarah Thompson, a friend's sister who'd taken the case at a discount, met them at the entrance, her briefcase bulging with testimonials and petitions. "Remember," Sarah said quietly as they walked through security, "just speak from your heart. The judge needs to see the real you, not some polished performance." The courtroom felt smaller than last time, maybe because more people had squeezed into the gallery. Caleb spotted Betty Johnson, Tom Henderson, and at least a dozen other neighbors who'd taken time off work to show support. Even Mike from the garage sat in the back, his usually grease-stained hands scrubbed clean. Charles sat at the opposite table, expensive suit, crisp and perfect, his team of lawyers arrayed around him like guards. He didn't look at Caleb, but his jaw tightened when Anna waved at her father. The bailiff called them to order, and Judge Martinez entered, her kind face serious as she reviewed the files before her. "I understand we have additional testimony today," she said, looking between the tables. Charles's lawyer stood first, a tall man with steel gray hair and gold cufflinks that probably cost more than Caleb's monthly rent. He launched into a practice speech about financial stability, educational opportunities, and the importance of maintaining Anna's current standard of living. Caleb's hands clenched under the table, as if love could be measured in dollar signs. When it was their turn, Sarah stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of Mr. Harper's character and his connection with Anna." She began distributing copies of the petition, now nearly 300 signatures strong. "These are statements from community members who know Mr. Harper's quality as a father," Sarah explained. From customers he's helped, parents whose children he's mentored, neighbors he's supported through difficult times. The judge took her time reading, her expression thoughtful. Charles's lawyer objected to the relevance, but Judge Martinez waved him off. "I'll hear it," she said firmly. Sarah called their first witness, Mrs. Whitaker. The guardian spoke clearly about the changes she'd seen in Anna since meeting Caleb. "She laughs more now," Mrs. Whitaker said, smiling at the little girl. "She's more confident, more willing to try new things. She feels secure, knowing her father wants her." Next came Luke, his teenage awkwardness falling away as he described life with his dad. "He taught me that being rich isn't about money," Luke said. "It's about having enough love to share with others. That's why he helps people even when we're tight on cash ourselves." Charles's lawyer tried to paint this as financial irresponsibility, but Luke stood his ground. "My dad says doing the right thing is always worth it." Finally, Sarah called Caleb to testify. He walked to the witness stand, his work-roughened hands steady as he took the oath. Sarah's first questions were easy, about his job, his home, his relationship with Luke. Then she asked, "Why do you want custody of Anna?" Caleb looked at his daughter, sitting between Mrs. Whitaker and Luke. She wore the dress Betty Johnson had altered for her, clutching a folder to her chest. "It's not about the money," he said quietly. "I didn't even know about the inheritance when I first met her. I just knew she was Emily's daughter, our daughter, and she needed me." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I'm not a wealthy man, but I know how to love a child. I know how to work hard and teach values and be there when it matters." The judge leaned forward. "What can you offer Anna that her uncle cannot?" "A family," Caleb answered without hesitation. "Not just me and Luke, but a whole community that already loves her. People who'll watch her grow up, teach her that wealth isn't measured by what's in your bank account, but by what's in your heart." Charles's lawyer stood for cross-examination, his questions sharp and designed to highlight Caleb's financial struggles. "How will you afford private school, piano lessons, the lifestyle she's accustomed to?" "I'll work harder," Caleb said simply. "I'll learn. And I'll teach her that happiness doesn't come from things, but from knowing you're loved for exactly who you are." As the lawyer pressed about overtime hours and childcare arrangements, Anna suddenly stood up. "Your Honor," her small voice carried clearly, "may I show you something?" Judge Martinez's stern expression softened. "Come forward, Anna." Anna walked to the bench, unfolding her paper with careful hands. "I drew this," she said, holding up a crayon picture. "This is my family." The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands: a tall man in blue, Caleb, a teenage boy in red, Luke, and a small girl in purple, Anna. Behind them was a house with a bright sun above it, and a brown dog that could only be Muffin. Written across the top in wobbly letters were the words, "My happy family." "See?" Anna pointed to each figure. "That's my daddy, and my brother, and me, and that's our house, where I want to live." She looked up at the judge earnestly. "Uncle Charles has a bigger house, but Daddy has more love." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Charles shifted uncomfortably in his seat while his lawyers whispered urgently together. Judge Martinez studied the picture carefully, then looked at Anna. "May I keep this?" she asked gently. Anna nodded solemnly. "I can make another one. I make lots of pictures at Daddy's house." He puts them on the fridge with the magnet letters. The judge smiled, accepting the drawing. "Thank you, Anna. You may return to your seat." After a few more questions from both sides, Judge Martinez called a brief recess. When she returned, her expression was thoughtful but lighter than before. "I've reviewed the evidence presented today," she began, "and I find myself particularly moved by the community support for Mr. Harper as well as the clear bond he's formed with Anna." She looked directly at Caleb. "While financial stability is important, it's not the only measure of a parent's fitness. Love, commitment, and character matter greatly." She set down her papers. "I'm setting a final hearing date for 2 weeks from today. In the meantime, the current joint custody arrangement will continue." She looked between both parties. "I strongly encourage all involved to consider what's truly best for Anna's emotional well-being." As people began filing out of the courtroom, Caleb felt a small hand slip into his. Anna beamed up at him, her other hand holding Luke's. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked hopefully. Caleb laughed, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I think we can manage that." Thunder rumbled in the distance as Caleb pulled into the courthouse parking lot. The dark clouds matched his unease. Something about this emergency hearing didn't feel right. Luke had wanted to come, But Caleb insisted he stay in school. No sense in both of them facing whatever this was. Sarah, his lawyer, met him at the courthouse steps, her face tight with worry. Charles's team filed new evidence late last night, she said, hurrying to match his stride. They're claiming they found financial irregularities. What irregularities? Caleb asked, holding the heavy door for her. I've never handled any of Emily's money except… He stopped short, remembering the small life insurance policy she'd left him. $10,000 that had gone straight to medical bills and funeral costs. The courtroom was nearly empty this time, just the lawyers, Charles with his usual smug expression, and a court reporter setting up her equipment. No friendly faces from town, no Mrs. Whitaker. Even Anna wasn't here. The silence felt heavy, threatening. Judge Martinez entered, her usual warmth replaced by grave concern. This court has received serious allegations regarding Mr. Harper's financial conduct, she began without preamble. Mr. Patterson, please present your evidence. Charles's lawyer stood, distributing thick folders to everyone. Your Honor, we've discovered that Mr. Harper received a substantial inheritance from Emily Harper upon her death, not just the previously disclosed life insurance, but stocks and bonds valued at over $50,000. Caleb's head snapped up. That's not true, he said, too loudly. Sarah touched his arm in warning. The lawyer continued smoothly, pulling out documents with official-looking letterheads. Bank records show these assets were liquidated within months of Mrs. Harper's death. Yet Mrs. Harper claimed financial hardship and took out high-interest loans for the funeral expenses. Because that's all I had, Caleb burst out. The insurance barely covered the hospital bills. There were never any stocks or bonds. Judge Martinez frowned. Mr. Harper, please let your counsel speak. Sarah stood, quickly scanning the documents. Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing of these alleged assets. We'll need time to verify these records. Unfortunately, Charles's lawyer said, his voice dripping false sympathy, we've also discovered evidence that Mr. Harper has been concealing income from his automotive repair business. These bank deposits, he produced more papers, show regular cash transactions that weren't reported on his tax returns. Caleb felt the blood drain from his face. He did sometimes accept cash payments from elderly customers who couldn't afford full price, charging them only for parts while doing the labor for free. He'd never thought of it as hiding income. He wasn't even making money on those jobs. Sarah tried to object, arguing they needed time to review and respond to these accusations. But Charles's team had more photographs of Caleb's garage showing cars being worked on after hours, statements from anonymous sources claiming he ran an illegal chop shop. These are lies, Caleb said, his voice shaking with anger and desperation. Your Honor, I've never stolen anything in my life. I help people who can't afford repairs. Ask anyone in town. Mr. Harper? Judge Martinez cut in sharply. These are serious allegations of financial misconduct and potential fraud. Until these matters can be fully investigated. No, Caleb whispered, already knowing what was coming. I have no choice but to suspend the joint custody arrangement. The judge's gavel crack seemed to echo forever. Anna will be placed in her uncle's sole custody pending resolution of these issues. You can't, Caleb protested, standing up. Please, Your Honor, she needs. Bailiff, the judge ordered, please escort Mr. Harper out if he cannot control himself. Sarah grabbed his arm. Don't make it worse, she whispered urgently. We'll fight this, but you have to stay calm. Charles was already on his phone, presumably calling Mrs. Whitaker to arrange Anna's immediate transfer. His thin smile made Caleb's fists clench. You did this, Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. You fabricated everything. I merely discovered the truth, Charles replied smoothly. Perhaps if you'd been more honest about your financial situations. From the beginning. The next hour passed in a blur of motions and orders. Sarah tried to negotiate supervised visits, but Charles's team pushed back, citing flight risk concerns. By the time they left the courtroom, heavy drops of rain were splattering against the courthouse windows. Caleb stood in the parking lot, watching Charles's black SUV pull up to the curb. Mrs. Whitaker emerged from a taxi, holding Anna's hand. The little girl looked confused, clutching her stuffed bear, the one she'd won at the fair with Caleb and Lou. Daddy? She called out when she saw him. What's happening? Caleb started forward, but two of Charles's security team stepped between them. Mrs. Whitaker was crying as she helped Anna into the SUV. Daddy! Anna pressed her hands against the window, her face crumpling. I don't want to go. Daddy, please. It's just temporary, sweetheart, Caleb called back, his voice breaking. I promise I'll fix this. I promise. But the SUV was already pulling away, Anna's terrified face growing smaller until it disappeared around the corner. The rain fell harder now, soaking through Caleb's jacket, but he barely noticed. Mrs. Whitaker approached him, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. I'm so sorry, she said. They arrived with court orders. I tried to delay to call you, but they threatened to have me arrested for interference. Caleb couldn't speak. His chest felt too tight, like all the air had been squeezed out of his lungs. I know you didn't do those things, Mrs. Whitaker continued. We all know. But Charles, he has so many connections, so much influence. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by a deep roll of thunder. Other people hurried past with umbrellas, avoiding looking at the man standing motionless in the downpour. Sarah touched his shoulder gently. Come on, Caleb, let's get you home. We'll start working on our response right away. But Caleb couldn't move. All he could see was Anna's face in that window, hear her crying for him. He'd promised to protect her, promised she wouldn't be taken away, and he'd failed. The rain fell harder, but Caleb remained rooted to the spot, water streaming down his face, mingling with tears he couldn't hold back anymore. Everything he'd built with Anna over these precious weeks, the trust, the love, the beginning of a real family, seemed to wash away with the rain. The digital clock on Caleb's nightstand blinked too. 17 a.m., its red numbers casting a faint glow across his darkened bedroom. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, his mind refusing to quiet down. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Anna's face pressed against that car window, her small hands reaching for him as Charles's SUV pulled away. The house felt too quiet. Even the usual creaks and settling sounds seemed muted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Down the hall, he could hear Luke's soft snoring through the partially open door. At least one of them could sleep. Caleb rolled onto his side, punching his pillow in frustration. The bed felt enormous and empty, just like it had in those first terrible months after Emily died. Back then, he'd at least had the comfort of knowing he'd done everything possible for her. But now, he'd failed Anna, failed Emily, failed himself. Charles's accusations echoed in his head. Financial irregularities, hidden income, fraud. The words made his stomach churn. Sure, he'd bent some rules helping folks who couldn't afford full-price repairs, but he'd never stolen anything, never cheated anyone. Yet somehow Charles had twisted his acts of kindness into something sinister. I should have seen it coming, he whispered into the darkness. Should have known they'd find something to use against me. The old alarm clock on his dresser ticked steadily, marking off seconds that felt like hours. 2:31 a.m. now. Caleb sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. Sleep wasn't coming anyway. He padded down the hallway in his worn flannel pajamas, trying not to wake Luke. But as he passed his son's room, a voice called out softly, Dad, you okay? Caleb paused in the doorway. Luke was sitting up in bed, moonlight from his window, silvering his dark hair. Did I wake you? Caleb asked. Nah, couldn't sleep either. Luke scooted over, making room on the edge of his bed. Thinking about Anna? Caleb sat down heavily, the old bed frame creaking under his weight. Can't stop seeing her face, he admitted. Keep wondering if I did the right thing, getting involved. Maybe if I'd just stayed away. Then she'd be stuck with that jerk uncle forever. Luke finished firmly. Dad, come on. You're not actually buying what they said about you in court, are you? Of course not, but... Caleb ran a hand through his hair. What if I'm not good enough? I'm just a mechanic. I can barely keep up with our bills some months. Maybe Anna would be better off. Stop. Luke's voice was sharper than Caleb had ever heard it. Remember what you told me when Mom died? About how being a family isn't about money or fancy houses? It's about love? Luke. And what about your promise to Anna? To Mom? Luke reached under his pillow and pulled out something that glinted in the moonlight. Emily's locket. You found this in my room earlier, didn't you? Left it for me to see? Caleb nodded slowly. He'd placed the locket there that morning, hoping Luke would understand its significance. I read Mom's letter inside, Luke continued. If you ever find her, love her for both of us. That's what she wrote, right? So, are you going to break that promise just because some rich guy with expensive lawyers says you're not good enough? Caleb felt something crack in his chest, not pain exactly, but the beginning of release. When did you get so wise? He asked hoarsely. Luke shrugged, but Caleb could see him fighting a smile. Learn from the best, I guess, even if the best is just a mechanic. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the night sounds of their small house. Finally, Luke spoke again, softer this time. You know what else you taught me? That when things get really tough, sometimes you need to ask for help. Not just from people, but from up there. He pointed toward the ceiling. Caleb followed his son's gesture, thinking of all the prayers he'd said in this house. After Emily's diagnosis, during her final days, in the long, dark months that followed, he hadn't prayed much lately, too caught up in the whirlwind of discovering Anna and fighting for custody. You're right, he said quietly. Again. Luke handed him the locket. Here, you might need this more than me tonight. Caleb closed his fingers around the cool metal, feeling the familiar shape of it. Thanks, buddy. Try to get some sleep, okay? You too, Dad. Back in his own room, Caleb sat on the edge of his bed and opened the locket. Emily's smiling face looked back at him from one side, while Anna's baby picture filled the other half. He traced both images with his thumb. I could use some help here, Em, he whispered. I don't know how to fight people like Charles. Don't know if I'm strong enough to win. But I know you trusted me to find her, to love her. His voice caught. I need to know what to do next. Need to know I'm not crazy for thinking I can be what she needs. The house creaked softly, and a cool breeze stirred the curtains. Caleb closed his eyes, letting the familiar weight of the locket rest against his palm. Slowly, he began to pray. Not the formal prayers of his childhood, but simple, honest words from his heart. Lord, I know I'm not perfect. Know I've made mistakes. But please, help me be strong enough for Anna. Show me the way to bring her home, not for my sake, but for hers. She deserves to be loved, not used as some pawn in her uncle's games. Emily knew that. Help me prove it to everyone else. As he prayed, something shifted inside him. Not a dramatic revelation, but a quiet settling of his spirit. The doubts didn't vanish completely, but they lost their sharp edges. In their place came something stronger, determination. When Caleb finally lay back down, the clock read 3:45 a.m. This time, sleep came more easily. His last conscious thought was of Anna's smile, not her tears in the car window, but her joy on the Ferris wheel, cotton candy staining her lips pink as she laughed at Luke's jokes. The gray light of dawn was just beginning to seep through his window when Caleb opened his eyes. His alarm wouldn't go off for another hour, but he was already fully awake. The crushing weight of yesterday had lifted somewhat, replaced by a clear sense of purpose. Charles might have money and influence, but Caleb had something stronger: truth, love, and an entire town of people who knew his real character. He sat up, Emily's locket still clutched in his hand, and began mentally listing everyone who might be willing to testify about his help with their cars, his character, his dedication as a father. Okay, Em, he whispered, touching the locket one last time before setting it carefully on his nightstand. Let's show them what fighting for family really means. The morning sun cast long shadows through the stained glass windows of First Methodist Church as Caleb pushed open the heavy wooden doors. Pastor Mike looked up from arranging hymnals, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. Caleb, I was hoping you'd come by. He set down the books and crossed the worn carpet. The whole congregation's been praying for you and Anna. Thanks, Pastor. Caleb's voice echoed in the empty sanctuary. I need some help. Charles, Anna's uncle, he's made some claims about me mishandling Emily's money. I know it's not true, but proving it. He trailed off, running a hand through his gray-streaked hair. Pastor Mike nodded thoughtfully. Actually, I might know someone who can help. Remember old Tom Wheeler? He was the manager at First National before he retired. He handled Emily's accounts. Tom? Caleb's eyes widened. I haven't seen him in years. Not since. Not since Emily's funeral, Pastor Mike finished gently. He asked about you last Sunday. Said he'd been following the custody case in the paper. Why don't you stop by his place? He still lives in that little blue house on Maple Street. Caleb's next stop was Harper's Auto Repair, where his morning crew was already busy with oil changes and tire rotations. Mary, his office manager for the past decade, waved him into her cramped workspace. I've been going through our old records, she said without preamble, gesturing to a stack of folders. Found something interesting. Remember that policy you started about sliding scale payments for folks who couldn't afford full price? Sure, we've been doing that for years. Well, I kept detailed records. Every reduced payment, every payment plan, every hour you worked off the books to help someone in need. She tapped a thick binder. And more importantly, I kept records of how you made up the differences yourself. Caleb blinked. You did? Mary smiled. Of course. Had to balance the book somehow. Look here. She opened the binder to a flagged page. Every time you cut someone's bill, you put in your own money to cover parts and labor. Must be thousands of dollars over the years. I just wanted to help people, Caleb said quietly. Exactly. Which is why I'm coming to court to testify about these records. Let's see, Charles tried to paint you as financially irresponsible when I show the judge how you've been quietly keeping this business honest and helping the community for 20 years. From the garage, Caleb drove to the small blue house on Maple Street. Tom Wheeler answered on the second knock. His thin frame stooped, but his eyes still sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Been expecting you, Tom said, ushering Caleb into a tidy living room. Sit down. Want some coffee? No thanks, Sit. Tom's tone brooked no argument. He disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with 2 steaming mugs. Now then, this business with Emily's accounts. I heard what Charles is claiming. Caleb wrapped his hands around the warm mug. I never touched that money, Tom. I swear. Course you didn't. Tom set his coffee down with a sharp click. In fact, you did just the opposite. I remember it clear as day. About a year after Emily passed, you came into the bank, said you'd found an old insurance policy of hers, wanted to make sure the money went to the right place. The memory surfaced slowly in Caleb's mind. That's right. It wasn't much. Maybe $2,000. $2,417, Tom corrected. You insisted we trace Emily's old accounts to make sure it went where it belonged. Wouldn't take a penny yourself, even though you were named as beneficiary. He leaned forward. I've still got copies of those transactions in my personal files. Been keeping them safe, just in case. You have proof? Caleb's voice cracked slightly. Better than that. Tom stood and walked to an old roll-top desk in the corner. I've got the original paperwork, showing the money trail from that insurance policy straight into Emily's family trust, the same trust Charles is now trying to claim you stole from. He pulled out a manila envelope, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. Plus, I've got something else, documentation of every attempt Charles made over the years to access those funds himself. Caleb's hands trembled as he accepted the envelope. Tom, I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me testify. Tom sat back down, picking up his coffee. I've been watching that man throw his weight around this town for 30 years. About time, someone stood up to him with hard facts instead of just rumors. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of visits and revelations. Old customers came forward with receipts showing Caleb's generosity. Former employees vouched for his integrity. Even the town librarian produced records of every book on auto repair Caleb had ever checked out, proving his dedication to staying current with changing technology despite his limited resources. By early afternoon, Caleb sat in his lawyer's office, watching Sarah Chin sort through the growing pile of evidence. Her usually serious face bore a slight smile as she examined Tom Wheeler's documents. This is exactly what we needed, she said, carefully placing the bank records in a fresh folder. Charles's whole case rests on painting you as financially irresponsible. But these records show the opposite. Careful documentation, ethical handling of funds, and a consistent pattern of putting others' needs before your own profit. She picked up Mary's binder next. And this sliding scale payment system? It's genius. Shows both business acumen and community-mindedness. You weren't just giving handouts. You created a sustainable way to help people while keeping your business stable. I never thought about it that way, Caleb admitted. Just seemed like the right thing to do. Sarah nodded, adding another stack of testimonials to her organized files. That's precisely why it's so powerful. These weren't calculated moves to look good. They were natural expressions of your character, documented by others over many years. She straightened the final pile of papers with satisfaction. Charles may have expensive lawyers, but we have something better. Proof of who you really are, supported by dozens of independent voices. She began laying out the folders in chronological order. I'll present the bank records first, establishing your history of ethical financial behavior. Then we'll bring in Tom Wheeler to directly refute Charles's accusations. Mary's testimony about the garage's business practices will show your ongoing commitment to both fiscal responsibility and community service. Finally, we'll have community members speak to your character and parenting skills. Caleb watched her methodical preparation, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. You really think we can win? Mr. Harper? Sarah looked up, her expression serious but confident. I've been practicing family law for 15 years. Cases like this often come down to one simple question: what's best for the child? With this evidence, plus Anna's clear attachment to you and Luke, I believe we can show the judge exactly why you're the right choice for her future. She closed the final folder and sat back. The hearing is in 2 days. Get some rest. Spend time with Luke. Let me worry about the legal strategy. You've given me everything I need to build a solid case. Caleb stood, feeling steadier than he had in days. The truth was coming to light, one witness at a time. And soon, he hoped, it would bring Anna home where she belonged. The morning news anchor's voice filled Caleb's small kitchen as he stood at the counter, hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee. On the screen, Rebecca Chin from Channel 5 News stood outside his garage, her red blazer bright against the weathered building. In a story that has captured our community's attention, local mechanic Caleb Harper is fighting to keep custody of his newly discovered daughter, Rebecca said, her expression earnest. Sources say Harper learned of 8-year-old Anna's existence just months ago, when a chance encounter led him to discover she was his late wife's child from before their marriage. Luke appeared beside Caleb, his school backpack slung over one shoulder. Dad, you're on TV. The screen showed footage of Caleb working on cars, then switched to interviews with his customers. Mrs. Martinez from the bakery appeared, her flour-dusted apron a familiar sight. Caleb's fixed my delivery van for years, she said. Sometimes I could only pay in installments, but he never complained. Just told me to bring him some of my empanadas when I could. More interviews followed. Tom Wheeler spoke about the bank records, his voice steady and authoritative. Mary detailed the garage's sliding scale payment system. Even Pastor Roberts from the Methodist Church appeared, praising Caleb's character and dedication to his son. The custody hearing is scheduled for this morning. Rebecca continued. Local residents have organized a show of support outside the courthouse, highlighting what many see as a battle between wealth and genuine family values. Caleb switched off the TV, his coffee forgotten. Luke, you don't have to miss school for this. Yes, I do. Luke's jaw set in a familiar stubborn line. Anna's my sister. We're family. They drove downtown in silence, but as they approached the courthouse, Caleb's hands tightened on the steering wheel. People lined the broad stone steps, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Many held handmade signs, Harper family strong, and love over money, and Anna belongs with her dad. Would you look at that? Caleb whispered. He parked in the small lot behind the building, where Sarah Chin waited. Her usual professional demeanor softened at their approach. The support is incredible, she said. I've never seen anything like it. They walked around to the front entrance. Caleb's steps faltered as he recognized face after face in the crowd. There was Dave from the hardware store, and the entire staff from Mary's Diner. The high school auto shop teacher stood with several students Caleb had mentored. Mrs. Martinez had brought her whole family, including her elderly mother in a wheelchair. A cheer went up as people spotted him. Someone started clapping, and the sound spread like ripples in a pond. Caleb ducked his head, overwhelmed by the wall of support. Mr. Harper! Rebecca Chin approached with her camera crew. Would you like to make a statement? Sarah stepped forward protectively, but Caleb touched her arm. It's okay. He turned to the camera, gathering his thoughts. I'm just a mechanic who found out he has a daughter. I'm not fighting for money or property. I'm fighting because Anna deserves to grow up in a home where she's loved for who she is, not what she inherited. And his voice caught. I'm humbled by how many people understand that. More applause followed his words. As they made their way up the steps, people reached out to pat his shoulder or murmur encouragement. Pastor Robert stepped forward to offer a brief prayer. Martinez pressed a paper bag into his hands, warm from fresh-baked empanadas. Inside the courthouse, the marble halls echoed with footsteps as people filed into the courtroom. Not everyone from outside could fit, but the gallery quickly filled. Caleb saw Charles at the front with his expensive legal team, their suits crisp and intimidating. Then movement caught his eye. Anna sat in the front row with her court-appointed guardian, wearing a blue dress with a white collar. Her face lit up as she spotted him, and she waved with such hope and trust that Caleb's heart squeezed in his chest. He waved back, trying to put all his love and reassurance into that simple gesture. Luke pressed against his side, and together they waited for the hearing to begin, surrounded by the strength of their community and the power of simple truth. The bailiff stepped forward, his voice carrying through the packed courtroom. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Margaret Reeves presiding. As the judge entered, Caleb stood tall, drawing courage from the hundreds of people who had chosen to stand with him on this crucial morning. In Anna's bright eyes, he saw all the hope and love that had brought them to this moment. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as Sarah Chin approached the bench, her posture confident despite facing Charles's team of high-priced lawyers. Judge Reeves adjusted her reading glasses, her expression neutral as she studied the document spread before her. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice clear and steady, "I'd like to present evidence that the financial documents submitted by Mr. Charles Montgomery regarding my client's handling of his late wife's inheritance were falsified." She gestured to Tom Wheeler, who sat in the front row. "We have the former bank manager here to testify." Tom Wheeler made his way to the witness stand, his gray hair neatly combed, wearing his best suit. After being sworn in, he cleared his throat and addressed the court. "I managed the First National branch where both Emily and Caleb Harper held their accounts," he explained, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "I remember distinctly when Emily received her small inheritance. Caleb insisted on keeping it separate from their joint account, saying it was her money to do with as she pleased." Sarah approached with several papers. "Mr. Wheeler, could you explain these bank statements?" Tom studied them carefully. "These are forgeries," he stated firmly. "Look at the routing numbers. They don't match our bank's format from that period." Additionally, he pointed to specific entries. "These transaction codes didn't exist in our system until 2018, years after these supposed withdrawals." Charles shifted uncomfortably in his chair as his lead attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Judge Reeves's eyes narrowed as she examined the documents more closely. Sarah continued, "We have additional testimony about Mr. Harper's financial character." She called Mrs. Martinez to the stand. The baker smoothed her skirt as she sat, her kind face determined. "Caleb has fixed my delivery van for 15 years, she testified. "When business was slow, he let me pay in installments, never charged interest. He even taught my son basic maintenance to help save money on repairs." One by one, community members took the stand. Mary from the diner spoke about Caleb's sliding scale payment system for struggling families. Pastor Roberts detailed Caleb's volunteer work at the church's youth mentoring program. Each testimony painted a picture of a man who valued people over profit. Charles's attorney attempted to object, claiming character witnesses were irrelevant to the financial allegations, but Judge Reeves overruled him. "Since your client raised the issue of Mr. Harper's fitness as a guardian based partly on financial responsibility, I find these testimonies highly relevant." The turning point came when Sarah presented the forensic document expert's report. Dr. Patricia Morrison, a respected specialist in questioned documents, took the stand with her findings. "The signatures on these financial records show clear signs of digital manipulation," she explained, pointing to enlarged images on a screen. "The pixelation patterns here and here indicate copying and pasting from genuine documents. Furthermore, the paper stock used shows manufacturing dates inconsistent with the purported age of these records." Charles's face had grown increasingly pale. When Judge Reeves turned her stern gaze upon him, he seemed to shrink in his expensive suit. "Mr. Montgomery," the judge's voice cut through the tension like a blade, "would you care to explain these discrepancies?" Charles stood, tugging at his tie. "Your Honor, that is, my team." He looked desperately at his lawyers, who avoided his eyes. "I only wanted what was best for Anna," he finished weakly. "By committing fraud?" Judge Reeves's tone could have frozen summer. "I suggest you leave my courtroom immediately, while I consider whether to refer this matter to the district attorney." Charles gathered his briefcase with trembling hands and hurried out, leaving his legal team to hastily request withdrawal from the case. The gallery buzzed with whispers until the judge's gavel restored order. "Mr. Harper," Judge Reeves said, "please take the stand." Caleb rose slowly, conscious of Luke's supportive hand on his shoulder and Anna's watchful eyes. After being sworn in, he sat, his work-roughened hands folded in his lap. "Your Honor," he began, his voice quiet but firm, "I never knew about Anna until that rainy day when I found her puppy. If Emily had told me, I would have loved Anna from the start, just like I love Luke." He paused, gathering his thoughts. When Emily died, I thought my heart would never heal. But then Anna came into our lives, and it's like Emily gave us one last gift." He looked at his daughter, tears gathering in his eyes. "I'm not rich. I can't give Anna fancy clothes or exotic vacations. But I can give her what Emily wanted for her, a home where she's loved for herself, not her inheritance, where she can laugh and play and just be a kid, where she has a brother who already adores her and a father who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe." The courtroom was silent now, hanging on his every word. Even the court reporter had paused, her hands hovering over her stenotype. "I made a promise," Caleb continued, his voice thick with emotion, "not just to Emily through her letters, but to Anna herself. I promised I wouldn't let anyone take her away. That promise isn't about money or property or social status. It's about love, pure and simple, the kind of love that makes a family." He straightened in his chair, meeting the judge's eyes directly. "Your Honor, I'm just a mechanic. I fix broken things for a living. Right now, what needs fixing isn't an engine or a transmission. It's a family. Anna needs stability, love, and truth in her life. I'm asking for the chance to provide that." Judge Reeves studied him for a long moment, then glanced at Anna, who sat clutching her stuffed bear, hope shining in her eyes. The judge removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I believe we could all benefit from a short recess," she announced. "Court will reconvene in 30 minutes. Her gavel fell with a sharp crack. The gallery rose as the judge left the courtroom. Caleb stepped down from the witness stand on shaky legs, and Luke immediately wrapped him in a fierce hug. Sarah squeezed his shoulder, smiling encouragingly. "You did great, Dad," Luke whispered. Through the crowd, Caleb caught Anna's eye. She gave him a small wave, and he waved back, his heart full of hope and fear and love. Now all they could do was wait for the judge's decision. The courthouse hallway buzzed with nervous energy as people filed back into the courtroom. Caleb's hands trembled as he straightened his tie, the same blue one Luke had helped him pick out that morning. Around him, friends and neighbors offered encouraging smiles and gentle pats on the shoulder. Mrs. Martinez pressed a paper bag into his hands. "Freshly baked cookies?" she whispered. "For after, when you're celebrating with your children." The way she said it, not if, but when, made Caleb's throat tight with emotion. Luke stayed close to his father's side as they made their way back to their seats. Across the aisle, Anna sat with Mrs. Whitaker, clutching her stuffed bear. When she caught Caleb's eye, she gave him a tiny wave, and he managed a warm smile despite his racing heart. Sarah, his lawyer, arranged her papers with steady hands. "Whatever happens," she murmured, "you spoke from your heart. That matters." The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Margaret Reeves presiding." Everyone stood as Judge Reeves entered, her black robes swishing as she took her seat. Her expression revealed nothing as she settled behind the bench and adjusted her reading glasses. "Be seated," she commanded, and the rustle of movement filled the courtroom. When silence fell, she folded her hands and looked out over the gathered crowd. "I have reviewed all evidence presented in this case thoroughly," she began, her voice clear and measured. "The attempted fraud by Mr. Charles Montgomery is a serious matter that will be addressed separately by the proper authorities." She paused, removing her glasses and fixing her gaze directly on Caleb. "Mr. Harper, when this case began, the central question appeared to be about financial stability and material provision. However, as these proceedings have unfolded, it has become clear that the real issue is about something far more valuable: the emotional well-being and future happiness of a child." Anna hugged her bear tighter, and Mrs. Whitaker put a comforting arm around her shoulders. "This court has heard extensive testimony about your character, Mr. Harper, not just from friends and neighbors, but from community leaders, business associates, and most importantly, from your son Luke. The picture that emerges is of a man who, despite modest means, has created a home rich in love, stability, and strong values." The judge picked up a document, glancing at it briefly. "The letters from your late wife, Emily, particularly the one expressing her wish for you to know about and care for Anna, carry significant weight. It's clear she trusted in your capacity for love and your strength of character." She set the paper down and looked at Anna. "Young lady, would you stand for a moment?" Anna rose slowly, still clutching her bear. Her flowered dress, clearly new for the occasion, rustled softly. "Anna, throughout these proceedings, you've shown remarkable courage. Your drawings, your testimony, and your clear attachment to Mr. Harper and his son speak volume. You may be seated." The judge folded her hands again, surveying the courtroom. "In family court, our paramount concern is always the best interest of the child. We must consider not just material provisions, but emotional security, family stability, and the capacity for nurturing healthy development." Luke reached for his father's hand, squeezing it tightly. Caleb could barely breathe. "Having weighed all evidence and testimony, I am prepared to render my decision." Judge Reeves sat straighter, her voice taking on a formal tone. "In the matter of custody regarding Anna Montgomery Harper, this court rules as follows." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Caleb could hear his own heartbeat. "Full legal and physical custody is hereby granted to Caleb Harper, with all parental rights and responsibilities thereof." A collective gasp rose from the gallery. Caleb's vision blurred with tears as Luke hugged him fiercely, but the judge wasn't finished. "Regarding the matter of Anna's inheritance, I order that all assets be placed in a trust to be administered by First National Bank of Riverside, with Mr. Harper as co-trustee. The funds will be available for Anna's education and well-being, with the bulk of the estate transferring to her control at age 25. She picked up her gavel. "Furthermore, I order that Mr. Charles Montgomery shall have no contact with Anna without express permission from Mr. Harper or future order of this court." The gavel struck. "This court's decision is final. We are adjourned." The gallery erupted in applause and cheers. Mrs. Martinez burst into happy tears, hugging the person next to her. Pastor Roberts beamed, nodding in satisfaction, but Caleb barely noticed any of it because Anna had broken free from Mrs. Whitaker's grasp. She ran across the courtroom, her dark curls bouncing, tears streaming down her face. Caleb knelt just in time to catch her as she threw herself into his arms. "Daddy," she sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." Caleb held her close, his own tears falling freely now. He felt Luke's arms wrap around them both, completing their family circle. Through his tears, he saw Mrs. Whitaker approaching with Muffin's leash in hand, the puppy prancing happily beside her. Anna's small body shook with relieved sobs as she clung to him. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You didn't let them take me away." "Never," Caleb murmured into her hair, holding his daughter. Officially, finally, legally his daughter, close to his heart. "I will never let anyone take you away, ever." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway as Caleb's truck rumbled to a stop. Anna sat between him and Luke, Muffin curled contentedly in her lap. Her eyes widened as she took in the modest two-story house with its weathered blue shutters and wraparound porch. "This is where you live?" she asked softly, pressing her nose against the window. "This is where we live," Luke corrected with a grin, emphasizing the we. As they stepped out of the truck, Anna gasped. The front yard had been transformed. Colorful balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze, tied to the porch railings and mailbox. A hand-painted banner stretched across the front of the house proclaimed, "Welcome home, Anna," in bright letters decorated with flowers and hearts. Mrs. Martinez stood on the porch, beaming, alongside several other neighbors. The smell of fresh-baked cookies wafted through the air. Anna instinctively moved closer to Caleb, suddenly shy in front of so many new faces. "It's okay, sweetheart," Caleb assured her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "These are all our friends. They helped us get ready for you." Luke grabbed the small suitcase Mrs. Whitaker had packed for Anna. "Wait till you see your room. We worked on it all week while the trial was happening." The neighbors kept their greetings brief, seeming to sense Anna's overwhelm. Mrs. Martinez pressed a plate of cookies into Caleb's hands, while Mr. Johnson from next door discreetly dropped off a casserole for dinner. Within minutes, they had dispersed, leaving the new family to settle in. Inside, Anna took tentative steps through the living room, taking in the comfortable but well-worn furniture. Family photos lined the walls, mostly of Luke and Caleb, but also several of Emily. Anna paused at one, reaching up to touch the frame. "That's from our wedding day," Caleb said softly. "Your mom was so beautiful." "She's wearing the same necklace as in my locket," Anna observed, her small hand going to the pendant beneath her dress. "Would you like to see your room?" Luke asked, bouncing slightly with excitement. "Dad and I painted it ourselves." Anna nodded eagerly, and Luke led the way upstairs, Muffin trotting at their heels. Caleb followed, carrying Anna's suitcase and the stuffed bear she'd won at the fair. The second bedroom, formerly Caleb's home office, had been completely transformed. The walls were a soft lavender color, with white curtains framing the window that overlooked the backyard. A twin bed with a flowered quilt sat against one wall, while a small white desk occupied the corner. A bookshelf held a mix of picture books and chapter books, and a comfortable reading chair sat nearby. But what made Anna's eyes light up was the special touch in the opposite corner. A cozy dog bed for Muffin, decorated with paw prints and already equipped with toys and a water bowl. "Muffin can sleep in here with me?" she asked, her voice full of wonder. "Of course," Caleb answered. "We figured you both might feel better together in a new place." Anna walked slowly around the room, trailing her fingers over the furniture. She paused at the desk, where someone had arranged a collection of art supplies, colored pencils, markers, and a fresh sketch pad. "Mrs. Martinez mentioned you like to draw," Luke explained. "And look," he opened the closet door to reveal a rod hung at Anna's height, with several empty hangers waiting for all your clothes, and there's more space for toys and stuff too. Anna turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. Her lower lip trembled slightly. "It's really mine? Forever?" Caleb knelt down to her level. "Yes, sweetheart, this is your home now, forever." She launched herself into his arms, hugging him tight. Over her shoulder, Caleb saw Luke watching with a soft smile, and he extended one arm to include his son in the embrace. After a moment, Anna pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Can I put my things away?" They spent the next hour helping Anna unpack her suitcase and arrange her belongings. Each item found its place: clothes in the closet, her favorite books on the shelf, the framed photo of her mother on the bedside table. The stuffed bear was carefully positioned against the pillows, and Muffin immediately made himself at home in his new bed. As the sun began to set, casting pink and orange light through the window, Caleb noticed Anna trying to hide her yawns. The emotional day was catching up with her. "How about we have some of Mrs. Martinez's cookies and milk, and then get ready for bed?" he suggested. Anna nodded sleepily. They trooped downstairs, where Luke poured milk while Caleb arranged cookies on plates. They sat at the kitchen table together, their first meal as a complete family, even if it was just cookies and milk. When the last crumbs were gone, Anna changed into her pajamas and brushed her teeth with the new toothbrush Luke had helped pick out, purple, her favorite color. Caleb tucked her into bed, making sure she had her bear and that Muffin was settled in his bed nearby. "Daddy?" she asked softly as he smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart? Will you be here when I wake up?" Caleb's heart squeezed. "I'll be right down the hall, and Luke is just across the way. You're safe here, Anna. You're home now." She smiled sleepily, already drifting off. Caleb leaned down and kissed her forehead, then quietly made his way to the door. He paused in the doorway, watching as Muffin stood up from his bed, padded over to Anna's, and curled up at her feet. 3 weeks after Anna came home, the afternoon sun streamed through the dusty windows of Harper's Auto Repair. The familiar scents of motor oil and rubber filled the air as Caleb worked under the hood of Mrs. Peterson's old Volvo. The rhythmic tapping of his wrench against metal mixed with the soft murmur of voices from his office, where Luke and Anna sat doing their homework. Caleb paused to wipe sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a smudge of grease. Through the office window, he could see Anna's tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on her math problems. Luke sat beside her, occasionally leaning over to help when she got stuck. Muffin dozed contentedly under the desk, his tail thumping against the floor whenever one of the kids reached down to scratch his ears. The scene made Caleb's heart swell. Just weeks ago, this garage had felt empty with just him and Luke. Now, it was filled with life. Anna had taken to spending her afternoons here after school, claiming the corner of his cluttered desk as her own personal study spot. She decorated it with crayon drawings of cars and flowers, which Caleb proudly displayed alongside Luke's old Little League trophies. The bell above the shop door chimed as Tom Bradley walked in, keys jingling in his hand. "Hey Caleb, got time to look at my truck's transmission?" "Sure thing, Tom. Just let me finish up here first." Caleb gestured to the Volvo. "How's Sarah doing with the new baby?" "Growing like a weed," Tom grinned, then waved at the kids through the window. "I see your crew's settled in nicely." Caleb nodded, pride evident in his voice. "They sure have. Anna's already reading above grade level, and Luke's been a great help getting her caught up in math." Their morning routine had fallen into place naturally. Caleb would wake early to pack lunches while the kids got dressed. They'd pile into his truck, dropping Anna off at her new elementary school before Luke headed to the high school next door. Some days, Mrs. Martinez would watch Anna after school if Caleb had too many repairs, but most afternoons found all three Harpers together at the garage. Sundays had become special family days. They'd go to church, where Anna had joined the children's choir and Luke helped with the youth group. Afterward, they'd take Muffin for long walks in the park, throwing sticks and watching him splash in the creek. Sometimes they'd pack a picnic, spreading out a blanket under the old oak tree, while Anna told elaborate stories about the shapes she saw in the clouds. Caleb finished with Mrs. Peterson's car and moved on to Tom's truck, his hands working automatically while his mind wandered. The trust fund from Emily's family sat mostly untouched, earmarked for Anna's college and future. What mattered more were the small moments, helping with homework, kissing scraped knees, celebrating good grades with ice cream sundaes. Around 5 o'clock, Caleb heard the office door open. Anna bounded out, waving a paper in her hand. "Dad, look! I got an A on my spelling test!" He wiped his hands on a shop rag and took the test, examining the neat rows of words. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. All that practicing really paid off." Luke followed behind her, backpack slung over his shoulder. "She only missed one word, necessary, but we worked on it, and now she can spell it perfectly. Necessary, Anna spelled proudly. "Speaking of necessary," Caleb said, checking his watch, "we should head home and start getting ready for the barbecue. The Martinezes and Johnsons will be over at 6. They had started hosting these casual weekend gatherings shortly after Anna moved in. It was their way of thanking the neighbors who had supported them through the custody battle, and it had quickly become a cherished tradition. Back home, the late afternoon sun warmed the backyard as they prepared for their guests. Luke cleaned off the grill while Anna set the picnic table with the cheerful red check tablecloth she'd picked out at the store. Muffin helped by chasing butterflies through Mrs. Martinez's flower garden that bordered their yard. Caleb marinated chicken and shaped hamburger patties, watching through the kitchen window as his children worked together. Luke was showing Anna how to fold the napkins into triangles, making her giggle by pretending they were paper airplanes. The sound of their laughter drifted through the screen door, mixing with the chirping of birds and the distant hum of lawnmowers. "Dad," Anna called out, "can we make your special lemonade?" "Of course," he answered, pulling out the big pitcher. "Come on in and help me squeeze the lemons." They gathered in the kitchen. Anna perched on a stool while Luke measured sugar. Caleb showed them his mother's trick of adding a pinch of salt to bring out the sweetness. As they worked, Anna hummed the song she was learning for the church choir, and Luke shared stories from his baseball practice. The kitchen filled with the citrus scent of fresh lemons and the warmth of family. Not the family Caleb had originally imagined, but the one that had found its way to him through chance, faith, and love. Looking at his children, he saw pieces of Emily in both of them. Luke's quiet determination, Anna's artistic spirit, but he also saw who they were becoming: kind, strong, and most importantly, happy. The doorbell rang, and Muffin barked his announcement of visitors. Anna rushed to answer it, calling out, "The Martinezes are here." Luke grabbed the pitcher of lemonade, careful not to spill. Caleb picked up the platter of meat for the grill, pausing just a moment to take in the scene. His modest home was about to fill with friends and neighbors, good food and conversation. But the real treasure was already here. In Anna's excited bouncing as she greeted their guests, in Luke's protective hand on his sister's shoulder, in Muffin's joyful circles around their feet, in the way they had all found their rhythm together, becoming something more than just a father and his children. They had become a family. "Dad," Luke called from the backyard, "Mr. Martinez wants to know if you need help with the grill." "Coming," Caleb answered, heading toward the sound of cheerful voices and children's laughter floating on the evening breeze. The late summer breeze rustled through the tall grass as Caleb's truck wound its way up the narrow dirt road. In the back seat, Anna pressed her face against the window, watching the town grow smaller below them. Luke sat beside her, one hand absently scratching Muffin's ears as the puppy balanced between them, tail wagging with excitement at the new adventure. "Are we almost there, Dad?" Anna asked, her hazel eyes bright with curiosity. "Just around this last bend," Caleb replied, navigating the familiar path. His heart beat a little faster as memories flooded back, memories of another evening, years ago, when he'd driven up this same road with a diamond ring hidden in his pocket and hope burning in his chest. The truck crested the hill, and Caleb parked in the small clearing beneath the old oak tree. Its branches spread wide against the golden sky, casting long shadows across the wildflower-dotted grass. The setting sun painted the clouds in brilliant shades of orange and pink, promising a spectacular sunset. "This place is beautiful," Anna breathed, climbing out of the truck. Muffin bounded after her, immediately distracted by the new smells and sounds of the hilltop. Luke helped Caleb spread out the old quilt they'd brought, weighing down the corners with smooth stones they found nearby. The evening air was warm and sweet with the scent of late summer flowers, and the first fireflies were beginning to emerge, their tiny lights dancing in the growing dusk. "Your mom loved it up here," Caleb said softly, settling onto the quilt. "This is where I asked her to marry me." Anna sat close to him, tucking herself under his arm. "Really? What happened?" Caleb smiled, remembering. "Well, I had it all planned out, packed a fancy picnic, practiced my speech for days. But when we got up here, I was so nervous I dropped the ring in the grass." Luke chuckled. "Did you find it?" "Your mom found it, actually. She was laughing so hard she could barely say yes." Caleb's voice grew tender. "She always said it was perfect because it was perfectly imperfect, just like real love should be." Muffin darted past them, snapping playfully at the fireflies that were now appearing in greater numbers. Anna giggled as he spun in circles, trying to catch the elusive lights. The puppy's enthusiasm was contagious, and soon Anna was running with him, her laughter echoing across the hilltop. Luke stretched out on the quilt, hands behind his head as he watched his sister play. "You know, Dad, I think Mom would be really happy right now." Caleb looked at his son, struck by the wisdom in his young face. "You think so?" "Yeah, she always wanted us to be happy, right? And now we are. Plus," Luke added with a grin, "she'd love how Anna's got you wrapped around her little finger." "Just like you did at her age?" Caleb teased, ruffling Luke's hair. The sun was sinking lower now, its golden light softening to deep amber. Anna came back to the quilt, breathless from running, and flopped down between them. Muffin followed, curling up in her lap with a contented sigh. "Dad?" Anna's voice was thoughtful. "Do you think Mommy can see us from heaven?" Caleb's throat tightened with emotion. He looked out at the horizon, where the sun was painting masterpiece colors across the sky. "I think she can, sweetheart. I think she's been watching over all of us all along." The three sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sky change. The first stars were beginning to appear in the deepening blue above them, and the fireflies created their own constellation in the grass below. Caleb took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Emily," he said softly, his voice carrying on the evening breeze. "I don't know if I ever properly thanked you. For Anna, for trusting that someday we'd find each other." He wrapped an arm around each of his children, drawing them close. "She's the most precious gift you could have given us. And I promise you, we'll love her enough for both of us." Anna sniffled quietly, and Luke reached across to squeeze her hand. Muffin lifted his head, sensing the emotion in the air, and gently licked Anna's cheek, making her smile through her tears. The sun touched the horizon now, a brilliant orange sphere sinking into a sea of purple clouds. Its last rays caught the tears on Anna's cheeks, making them sparkle like diamonds. Caleb remembered other tears that had fallen on this hilltop. Tears of joy when Emily said yes, tears of grief when he'd come here alone after losing her, and now these tears of healing and hope. "Look," Luke pointed. "You can see the whole town from here." They could see the lights coming on below them, twinkling like earthbound stars. The church steeple where Anna sang in the choir, the baseball field where Luke practiced, the garage where they spent their afternoons, all the places that marked their daily lives together. Anna stood up, pulling both Caleb and Luke to their feet. "Can we hold hands, like in church when we pray?" They formed a small circle, hands clasped together, Muffin sitting attentively at their feet. The last sliver of sun painted them in golden light, their shadows stretching long across the hilltop grass. "I love you, Dad," Anna whispered. "Love you too, Dad," Luke echoed. Caleb squeezed their hands, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. Together they watched the sun make its final descent, taking with it the last traces of their separate pasts, and leaving them standing in the growing twilight, not just a father and his children, but a family, finally whole. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Caleb Harper, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.